Sound check, Councillor Vicente.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Committee of Council. And all members, I believe, are present today. I know Councillor Singh is just outside the doors there, and Councillor Vicente is joining us online. Councillor Tour, is Councillor Tour joining us online yet? No? Do we need to do a roll call then? No? Okay. So I'm sure Councillor Tour will get here very soon. Our next item of the agenda is approval of the agenda. Do any members wish to add any business to today's meeting? If you do, please put your name in the chat box or put your name on the board. Let me just check here. I see nothing. So, yes, Mayor Brown.
I have one addition to the agenda. I believe we have the wording on. Looking to the clerk, it's in-camera item.
Through you, Chair Santos, yes, I did receive word from the city solicitor that you're proposing to add a new business item to closed session that would be under litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, and personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, a discussion regarding bylaw enforcement.
Yes.
That would be identified as proposed item 15.3 on today's agenda.
Thank you, Mayor Brown and Mr. Clerk. So that's just one item? Yep, perfect. Any other additions to the agenda from members of committee? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, any other additions?
Yes, Chair Santos and members of committee, we have an added delegation that will be identified as 6.6 from Jesse Jones, Jones & Jones Group, and this is in regard to the discussion item on today's agenda, item 10.3.1, regarding the 50th anniversary celebration and branding. So that will be added delegation 6.6.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Councillor Palleschi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, Mayor Brown has a discussion item related to specific streets in Ward 2, and I wanted to open it up to be Ward 2 because they don't capture all the streets that he's added in there.
Thank you, Councillor Palleschi. So not specific streets, just generally Ward 2. Mr. Clerk, you're good with that? Through
you, Chair Santos, are you talking about, Councillor, the discussion item that the mayor's added? That's on the agenda? Okay, so it's generally in regards to Ward 2 streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Your name is on the board again? Oh, Councillor Vicente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Add one discussion item on the Portuguese Lusofonia Festival, please. Myself, Councillor Medeiros, and Mayor Brown would like to speak to that.
Okay.
So through you, Chair Santos, members of committee, that will be under community services as item 12.3.1 under new or other business.
Any further additions? I see another name.
One quick question, Councillor. I'm just looking, the auto thefts item, I'm just looking for it on the agenda. What item is it under right now?
Through you, Chair Santos, I believe it is 10.3.2 under corporate support services. 10.3.2, discussion item.
Thank you, members of committee. Anything further? I see none. Mr. Clerk, any other updates for the agenda today? Okay, thank you. I have a motion from Councillor Keenan for opposed. That motion carries. Our next item is declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Do any members have a declaration of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act for any matter to be considered on today's agenda? If so, please let us know. Okay, I will declare that I do have a conflict. I have sent in the form to the clerk under item 6.2 as well as 11.2.3 related to the noise wall discussion. And so at that point in time, Vice Chair Councillor Palleschi will be taking the chair for me. Oh, the nature of the conflict is that my parents actually own property within Rosedale Village. And so I will not be participating in that discussion. Any further members with any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none. Thank you very much. The next item is consent. As part of our consent motion process, I will read each agenda item that is subject to the consent motion, and any member may verbally identify the item to be held for debate during the meeting. Any item not held for debate will be considered as part of the consent motion and voted on for approval. I'll start reading the relevant items, and please let me know if you would like to hold. 8.2.1, we're holding because there's delegations. 8.2.2, staff report housekeeping amendments to business licensing bylaw. 3322013. That is in consent. 9.1.1 is being held for a staff presentation. 10.2.1, staff report capital project financial status report Q3 2022 in consent. 10.2.2, staff report 2022 third quarter operating budget report. That is in consent. 10.2.3, staff report 2022 third quarter reserve report. Consent. 10.2.4. Okay, Councillor Singh is holding the reserve report. 10.2.3. 10.2.4, staff report state of local infrastructure report 2021.
Sorry, that's the one I meant to hold.
Okay,
10.2.4.
thank you. So infrastructure, Councillor Singh? Okay, so then we're putting 10.2.3 back into consent, Mr. Clerk. 10.2.5, staff report status of general accounts receivable. Consent. 10.2.6, staff report purchasing activity quarterly report third quarter 2022. Consent. 10.2.7, staff report active consulting service contracts third quarter 2022. Consent. 10.2.8, staff report, thank you, Councillor Singh. 10.2.8 is held, important and commemorative dates 2023. Next item, 10.2.9, staff report 2023 tourism sponsorship program. Consent. 10.3.1, discussion item from Mayor Brown is going to be held as held. 10.3.2 is held. 11.2.1, staff report traffic bylaw administrative update. Consent. 11.2.2, staff report request to begin procurement of underground locates services for street lighting, traffic signal, transit, and storm sewer for a 2-year period. Consent. 11.2.3 is held. 11.3.1 is held. 15.1, open meeting exception, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, and a position plan procedure criteria or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board, property acquisition matter. Consent. And 15.2 is also held, so we'll be going in camera for that. Mr. Clerk, can you please summarize the items held by members for consideration or not part of the consent motion?
Through you, Chair Santos, to members of committee, the following items, for convenience, I'll just say the items that have been held. 8.2.1, I erroneously identified as possible delegations. It's actually 8.2.2, the staff report housekeeping amendments on the business licensing bylaw.
Okay.
So that should be held in case there are delegations. I know Councillor Singh had identified interest in 8.2.1. Do you wish that item to be held, Councillor Singh, on fireworks?
I think just an update from staff would be good.
Okay, so that'll be held. So 8.2.1 on fireworks for New Year's Eve is held by Councillor Singh. 8.2.2 is being held for possible delegations. 10.2.4, staff report on state of local infrastructure report 2021 is held by Councillor Singh. 10.2.8, a staff report on important and commemorative dates in 2023 is held by Councillor Singh. Discussion items have been held by the respective members. And that is it for items being held, with the balance being added to the consent motion in terms of staff reports.
Thank you so much. I have a motion moved by Councillor Medeiros to approve the consent motion. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That carries. Announcements. Our next item is 5.1, an announcement introducing new FDI coordinator for Africa and Caribbean markets, Uche Okugo. Regional Councillor Tour is the sponsor for this announcement. Is Councillor Tour here? Online, perhaps?
Hi, I'm online.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Councillor Tour. Amanda Leard, Manager, Investment Attraction, will start the announcement. Amanda, welcome. Please go ahead.
Thanks. Good morning, Mayor Brown, members of council, senior leadership, staff, and residents. I'm pleased to be here today to introduce Uche Okugo as the Investment Attraction Coordinator for the Africa and Caribbean markets. Many of you will recognize Uche through his previous position as Facility Coordinator with Facility Operations and Maintenance at City Hall, and through his work with Brampton Toastmasters. Uche joins the Economic Development team with an extensive educational background and network as it relates to these markets. Uche is a proud Bramptonian and active community member, leading the Rotary Club of Brampton's initiative on economic development and supporting other programs that offer assistance to Brampton newcomers. Please join me in welcoming Uche to the Economic Development team.
Thank you, Mayor Brown, members of council, senior leadership, fellow Bramptonians. Just a few words of thanks. I want to start by thanking the council for this office and the opportunity to serve. I also want to thank Director Claire Burnett and the wonderful team at Economic Development for an awesome first month since I've been with them. I also want to thank Director Nisar Ahmed and the staff of Facility Services and Operation and Maintenance for the chance to also have a meaningful municipal experience, work experience. Going forward, I would work with the ECDEV team to do my best possible so that these markets will actually have a place to do business with and in Brampton. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and welcome, Uche. We are so proud to have you. Councillor Singh would like to say a few words.
Yeah, I just wanted to say when I saw on LinkedIn that you were joining the ECDEV team, very happy. I saw you at the Rotary Club, and I remember, I believe it was from England. We had the representative there, and you did the speech, and it was good to see somebody giving back to the community that they work in. So wish you nothing but success in your role. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Singh, and congratulations again, Uche. Our next announcement is item 5.2 regarding World Interfaith Harmony Week, February 1st to February 7th. Mayor Brown is the sponsor, Urs Heer, co-chair, and Reverend Joanne Hedge, chair of the Interfaith Council of Peel, are present here today, I think. Welcome, Urs and Rev Hedge. Are they here?
I could, Councillor Santos, before we call up the team from the Interfaith Council, just to say how lucky we are in Brampton that we have an interfaith community that talks to each other, that works together, understanding that our faith communities are a force of good in our city. And I believe we're going to have the Interfaith Proclamation to present to the leadership team. And just I want to say on behalf of the city, thank you to our faith communities that help move our city forward in such a positive manner.
Thank you so much, Mayor Brown, for those opening remarks. And Urs and Reverend Hedge, you have the floor for the announcement.
Greetings, Councillor Santos and all of the councillors, Mayor, Bramptonians. Thank you very much for having us here, and thank you very much for the proclamation to celebrate and recognize World Interfaith Harmony Week, which was an annual UN event celebrated between February 1st and February 7th. We're so happy that we have a city that's very diverse. We have many faith communities, and we have many faith institutions that do a lot of good for our city. And so, the Interfaith Council of Peel has been around since the 80s, and we've been doing good work in the region, and we're really happy to have a presence here in Brampton. I'd like to introduce our chair, Reverend Joanne Hedge from Applewood United Church, who will say a few words and a prayer.
Thank you, Mayor Brown and councillors. Thank you for joining in this global celebration. The UN, as was mentioned, has for decades now marked this particular week as a time to focus on our responsibilities to one another, to be open and accepting, to build peace and understanding between the faith traditions around the globe. So as a diverse and rich community, Brampton really does have that opportunity to celebrate and mark this week with all the fullness of of who you are as the city of Brampton. So again, congratulations for making this proclamation and declaring that your faith communities are important to you, which they certainly are, and help to build strong community together. And so I'm going to offer a prayer. If you are a person of faith, you might take a moment of stillness to connect with what is beyond you. If that is not your practice, this might be a time of contemplation on our connections to all humanity. Source of love and wholeness that we call by many names, bring us together in this time and space today, here in the city of Brampton, and into the days to come as we observe this United Nations Week of Interfaith Harmony. May we continue to listen to one another across our faith traditions. May we continue to learn about each other with mutual respect, knowing that at the core of our humanity is the desire to live in peace with one another. Recognizing also, as people of faith, our call to both love God and love neighbor, but as communities and as all of humanity, our call to love good and love the neighbor. May it be so.
Beautiful.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank the members of the faith community who are here today, who've joined us. So thank you. And they'll be joining in a photo with mayor and council, if that's
Sure.
possible.
We'd like to take a photo. Yeah. If all members can join up there to the front.
Everyone get close. It's harmony. Councilor Fletcher doesn't bite. Okay, let's look at this. Let's go left to right.
Okay, we also have added delegation item 6.5, or is that incorrect? Related to this announcement from Nayan Brambat, president of the Gujarati Group of Brampton. Is Nayan here? Perhaps online.
Through you, Chair Santos, I'll just check. I don't see Nayan Brambat online. Is Nayan here?
No.
Okay, so I suggest then we just move on, Chair Santos.
Okay, thank you so much. And there was no delegation, so there's no motion there. Just before we go into public delegations, as chair, I just want to acknowledge that today's the start of Black History Month, a very important month for us to celebrate the contributions of our Black community. And today there is a flag raising as well as a number of different events this evening and a number of events throughout the month of February. Happy Black History Month, everyone. Next item is public delegations. All delegations that are coming forward are going to receive a maximum of 5 minutes to present their delegation, and with 1 minute remaining, the clerk will be flashing a reminder that you would have 1 more minute left. Thank you, Peter. It's getting fancier every single committee meeting. The first delegation is 6.1, possible delegations regarding the proposed amendment to business licensing bylaw 332-2013 regarding vendors of fireworks. This item relates to 8.2.2 on today's agenda. Mr. Clerk, do we have any delegations for today?
There are, through you, Chair Santos, there are no registered or requested delegations through the clerk's office. Is there anybody present that wishes to speak about this amendment to the business licensing bylaw? And seeing none, there are no delegations.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. The next item is possible delegations where I have declared a conflict, so I will ask Councillor Paleshi, Vice Chair of Legislative Services, to please resume the chair, and I will excuse myself from the chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Santos. Thank you, members of council. Item 6.2, possible delegations, public notice to enact a bylaw to impose charges for the local improvements works under Ontario Regulation 586/06 of the Municipal Act 2001, construction of noise attenuation barriers, noise walls, on city property affecting the villages of Rosedale. Are there anybody that is in the audience today to delegate?
Through you, Chair Paleshi, there is nobody present in person, but we do have a registered delegation from Rick Wesselman, Chair of the Villages of Rosedale, who has joined us remotely for a delegation on this item.
Rick, if you're there, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. Chairman Paleshi, Mayor Brown, councilors, and of course all of the staff. I do apologize for not being able to be there in person. My work schedule just didn't give me enough time to get down there and back. Wow, where does the time go? We're approaching 5 years since Josephina and I first delegated to council, and I do see quite a few new faces on council. So let me reintroduce myself. My name is Rick Wesselman. I'm the chairman of the Villages of the Board of Rosedale. I'll be brief. I'll definitely won't use 5 minutes. On behalf of myself, the board of directors of the villages, as well as the residents, I want to thank a few people. City staff, both engineering and legal, for all the heavy lifting to get us to this point in the process. Since I know they're listening, I also want to thank our property management team for working to secure the resident petitions, the condo bylaws, construction and perpetual easements, as well as a letter of credit that was integral to this process. I actually have a new lead-in for a joke. How many lawyers does it take to build a noise wall? Haven't figured out the punchline yet, but yes, the legal process was much more than we expected. And finally, council, of course, for all your support. Thanks again, and I'll yield back the rest of my time to the chair.
Thank you very much. Is there any other members in the audience that would like to delegate on this matter? Is there anybody else online? Come on down. Yeah. Come down, state your name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes. And then when you're done, I think we have a book on the table behind you. Maybe not? No? We'll just record your name and address.
Here. Yes, I'm Cheryl Crompton. I'm from 50 Via Rosedale, Unit 314. I've lived in Rosedale for 6 years, and I want to thank your council and Rick for all the hard work they've done for our village. It is an awesome retirement community that has been very satisfactory for so many people, and that wall will also hopefully keep people that might enter our golf course and some of the homes over there, because I know women are upset about that. So thank you, Rick, and thank you, all the gentlemen and women in this council for this.
Thank you very much.
I'm from Toronto, and I used to go to the City Hall for various things from my
very nice.
Publishing and media company, so thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to delegate on this item? Seeing none, if council members would like, I can bring this item forward now if you don't have too many comments. If not, we'll leave it where it is. Okay, we'll bring it forward. Members of council, you have before you 11.2.3. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, I just want to thank staff. This has been quite a journey, and we're finally there. And thank you. I know the community of Rosedale is very happy and delighted. I want to thank Rick as well. He's been a good partner to work with, and everybody at Rosedale, we're finally at a point where we're gonna get something done and something so we can feel and touch and some change. And I know the community's been waiting for some time for that. So I just wanted to take the time out to thank you. I know it's been a journey, but we're there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deputy Mayor Singh. So we have before you 11.2.3 Staff Report Budget Amendment Local Improvement Project Retrofit Noise Wall at the villages of Rosedale, Churchville might be next. North side of Sandalwood Parkway at Dixie Road to via Rosedale and west side of Dixie Road from Sandalwood Parkway to approximately 77 meters northerly thereof along Dixie Road, Ward 9. It's been moved by Deputy Mayor Singh. All in favor? That carries. And receiving the delegations in that motion, thank you, Deputy Mayor Singh. We'll now ask Councillor Santos to return.
Thank you very much. The next item is a delegation from Badar Shamim, President-elect, Rotary Club of Brampton, Rotary Club of Brampton History, Challenges and Exceptions. Welcome always, Badar. You have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Councillor. That's a tough limit given the amount of work Rotarians do in and around Brampton, but I'll try my best to do justice. First of all, congratulations to the returning as well as new city councillors and His Worship, Mr. Mayor, on getting re-elected. I am today joined by a few colleagues, including our club president, Uche Okugo, who you have just heard about earlier today. I'm also joined by our vice president nominee, John Digby, our club secretary, Rita Gale, and our past president, Venora Sprain. Rotarians tend to do succession planning 3 years out. So John Digby will be the club president in 3 years from now. After me, it's a young lawyer by the name Tim Lockhart who will be our club president. Unfortunately, he's not here. I'm hoping he's watching us online, though. So Rotary Club of Brampton is part of a much larger organization, a service organization of business owners and professionals called Rotary International. We're a 1.4 million member strong global organization with a mandate to support local community initiatives, both youth as well as seniors programs, as well as healthcare and literacy programs through fundraising. Rotary International literally started with 4 business owners and professionals getting together in downtown Chicago and realizing one day that there were no public washrooms. They threw some money together, built public washrooms, and lo and behold, their businesses benefited and grew. And hence, the mantra behind Rotarians that the one who serves most profits most. Our own club started in 1940, so we will be celebrating our 83rd anniversary this year. And quite frankly, the genesis of our club was exactly the same. A few business owners and professionals came together and started to support local community initiatives. I've given each one of you one of these bookmarks. And on those bookmarks, you will see a brief synopsis of who Rotary Club of Brampton members are. And it also gives you a brief summary of everything that our club has accomplished or has strived to do in Brampton over the last 83 years. From supporting Sheridan College's Applied Arts and Technology program, to supporting the healthcare system, Peel Memorial Center, to supporting our local YMCA for youth activities, to building our skating rink just across the street from the City Hall, to supporting Century Gardens Community Recreational Center, and student scholarships in multiple Brampton secondary schools and Sheridan College. Today, our club not only supports what we call a Rotaract Club, where there are Rotarians within the age group of 18 to 30, but we're also sponsoring 3 Interact clubs in high school levels in Brampton. Last 3 years have been challenging, to say the least. Despite those COVID-related challenges and related lockdowns, we did try our level best to continue to support our community. We concluded our pledge to Willem Oster Hospital by completing our pledge of $500,000 in 2021. For COVID outreach, not only did we donate money for PPEs to the local hospital, but we also supported the same in hospitals around the world through international grants to some of the international jurisdictions that are not as privileged as Canadians. In addition to that, we also started supporting the local food banks, knowing that the food demand, given the economic uncertainty, was going up. Over the last 3 years, we have, through our friends and through our club's resources, now raised over $100,000 for our food bank region, as well as the other food banks in Brampton. In addition to that, I'm sure you're aware that we're the title sponsors for Santa Claus Parade. We also donated $25,000 for that parade. I see the 1 minute reminder, so I'll just stop here. In a nutshell, last 3 years have made it extremely difficult for us to go out and engage community members face to face and bring them into our club, introduce them to the club members, and also introduce them to all the fundraising activities we do. Ribbon Roll tends to be our largest fundraiser. Last year we lost money on it, not only because it's still earlier on and people are not coming out and attending fundraisers as robustly as they normally do, but also because we saw an increase in the cost of putting together such events. And some of those costs were directly related to the costs that were passed on to us from the City of Brampton. So I'm here basically on behalf of my members, club members, to ask for this council's support in us not only being able to put together events like Ribbon Roll that allows us to sustain some of our fundraising activities, but also help us as the executive of the club in terms of our fiduciary duty to do the most we can by managing our assets and maximizing the community's benefit out of those assets. That's all, and Madam Chair, with your permission, we would also like a picture with this council member.
Thank you so much. Badar, Mayor Brown, a few comments.
Badar, you touched on something we didn't actually hold today, and that was sort of these, the right word is sort of those key legacy events. Yeah, the tourism report. And I've actually heard this a few times, and you just brought it up again. Procedurally to the clerk, I know we've already gone through the agenda, but maybe we need to have a conversation on that. We could also do it next week at council. I'm looking over to members of council what your thoughts are, but I am concerned that we have changed the level of some of these legacy events, and whether it's the Ribbon Roll, which supports the hospital, or the Jazz Festival, which was jam-packed. So procedurally, if we want to have that conversation, looking at the size of the agenda today, is there an indulgence to have that conversation today?
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Mr. Clerk, could we refer some of this delegation to council next week, perhaps, for further questions, or perhaps we can ask staff to answer some of those questions now?
I'm just really the will of council. Okay.
So through you, Chair Santos, I guess there's a couple of options, one that you mentioned and a couple that the mayor mentioned. So the item 10.2.9 on the tourism sponsorship program for 2023 has been approved as part of the consent motion. If committee wishes to reopen that, it's a 2/3 vote to consider it based on the delegation input today. The other option is that it gets approved as it already has been, and it can be considered by council next week at its meeting. Otherwise, as you had suggested, Chair Santos, there could be some questions asked of the delegation in terms of their needs, and those matters could be referred to council next week when council considers the recommendations which are in the tourism sponsorship program, if that's the will of committee. So there's a number of options.
Thank you so much. And so I'm just going to reopen that particular item so that we can have a discussion on it today. Is there anyone opposed to reopening that particular report regarding tourism, which was previously put into consent? Anyone opposed? None. So, Mr. Clerk, we will deal with that report as it arrives on the agenda later today. Mayor Brown, are you okay with that?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Badar. Any further questions? Okay, and we have a request for a photo. Let's do it. Okay, so we have a motion from Mayor Brown to receive the delegation. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That carries. Again, thank you very much, Badar and the Rotary Club, for delegating today. The next delegation is from Kiva Thomas, community member, regarding a request to rename Jorgen Jensen Parkett to Blackwell Lal Medicinal Parkett. Is Kiva here today? Hi, Kiva. Welcome, come on down, and you have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. Morning, council members. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Oh, I catch my breath. Just walked down a few steps. So today I am requesting the Committee of Council to agree upon a motion by which the committee will appoint this request, naming the Jorgen Jensen Parkett to Black men. There should be a correction. Black men and Lal Medicinal Parkett to the appropriate city staff or department for research and investigation for implementation. Next slide. Before I begin, I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. I currently sit with all of you on Treaty 19 here in Peel Region, and it is shared between the Mississaugas, the Mohawks, and tribes with Otter clans. Nisi-Wasquem, and forgive my pronunciation, is a Cree word meaning cousins. All of you who are also located on the land, which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among the Mississauga peoples and Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nations, and all the territories covered under the William Treaties. Brampton Peel Region is home to many First Nations, Inuit, Métis, and possibly Taínos peoples. Next slide, please. So on August 20th, I don't know if all of you here in council know of the fatal car crash that took place just off of Conestoga Drive. Just a few bullet points here on my slide to address what City TV News reported. Peel Regional Police have confirmed on that date that 3 siblings they were victims, were deadly killed in this fatal car crash, and officers responded to the area of Conestoga Drive and Elmvale Avenue just north of Sandalwood Parkway after 2 a.m. where the vehicle had struck the tree. I have a raw footage there. I don't know if all of you had an opportunity to watch this raw footage. I'm not asking that it be played right now, but it shows just how horrific this experience was for the family members and for these children, who I'd like to mention their names. Teresa Blackman Law, excuse me. She was 19. And, Judah Blackman Law, he was 17. And Pharaoh Blackman Law, who was 16. What remains unknown to all of you and all of us here as Brampton residents is the lineage and heritage of these children. They are descendants of mixed ethnicity, and this also includes First Nations. What also remains unknown is how the family members are coping and what strategies are in place to support the community with healing. In the news report, many in that neighborhood were just devastated, and we need to pay attention to how vicarious trauma impacts not only those who are directly impacted, but also those who are indistant, like myself right now. Can you go to the next slide, please? So I'm proposing that the Committee of Council again consider this motion to rename the park and to consider adding medicinal plants to this neighborhood, to this park. It is in honor of the Blackman Law children who lost their lives on August 20th. Statistically, as of 2022, forgive me, there are approximately 2,925 respondents in Brampton Peel Region who identify as First Nations, therefore making them one of the most vulnerable populations in our city. Planting sage has significant scientific antifungal purposes, which is used in healing and is known among the First Nations community, as well as cedar is scientifically known to have, excuse me, I'm looking at my notes, known to have decontaminants, which is also antifungal agents, also used medicinally as healing properties. Both are natural plants, which would add value to those who identify as First Nations and those who live within the neighborhood. And this is my motion and request.
Thank you so much for your delegation. I have no questions from members of council on the board, so a motion from Councillor Paleshi to receive the delegation. Anyone opposed? Thank you, that motion carries. Thank you for your delegation today. Mr. Clerk, I believe the next delegation is 6.6.
That is correct.
The added delegation from Jesse Jones in relation to the discussion item on Brampton's anniversary and branding. Welcome, Jesse.
Hey.
And you have up to 5 minutes.
Awesome. Good morning, Mayor Brown, councilors, staff, and everyone present here today. I know how hard all of you work to make our city one of the greatest and best places to live in Canada, and I want to start out by saying how much I appreciate all of that work. Thank you, Mayor Brown, councilors, clerk's office for inviting me to present today. Before I begin, I just want to take a second. A commitment to civic duty has always been prioritized and encouraged in my home growing up, and I stand here today because of that, following in the footsteps of those who came before me. I'm also standing here today as the head of Jones & Jones Group, a marketing, creative, and production company that's actually right outside on Queen Street 15 that my parents, Denise and Alan, founded over 30 years ago to showcase the wealth of talent in the Afro-Caribbean and multicultural communities and to create meaningful connections between those communities and the corporate world. At Jones & Jones, we've had the honor of spearheading some large-scale events, marketing campaigns, national research initiatives for first-class brands like TD, Coca-Cola, and many others. But I'm also a proud son of Brampton, who when asked in November to MC this city's sponsorship forum, which Deputy Mayor Harkirat Singh also attended, I was excited to support the sponsorship team's vision of positioning Brampton as a world-class brand, offering the business community a range of mutually beneficial partnership opportunities. I was also inspired to see in the briefing notes what I see every day through our office windows, right outside on Queen Street in the heart of downtown. Brampton looks like all of Canada in one city. The multiplicity of people, cultures, beliefs, and businesses is gold standard. It's the North Star that sets us apart as a thriving economic, cultural, environmentally friendly, and progressive community. And with the median age of 35 and an emerging population of young families, the time has come for a more accurate identity that aligns with our current and future reality. So what does this mean? Simply put, our name must continue to reflect our nature. Flower City was the perfect name when we were the village of Brampton, whose primary industry was greenhouses. Today, our major economic sectors are vast, from advanced manufacturing, retail administration, logistics, information and communication technologies, food and beverage, life sciences, and business services. We are also the fastest growing and youngest of Canada's largest cities, with 250 cultures that we speak, 250 cultures and 115 languages. But I'm not telling you anything you don't know, which is why, with our 50th anniversary quickly approaching in 2024, there's no time like the present to refresh our flourishing brand. I know this is something that will require a lot of thought, meetings, and insights from a wide range of stakeholders, but there's good news. I've had one-on-one conversations with a lot of fellow Brampton natives who agree it might be time for a change. And there's precedence for this type of initiative. Case in point, Mississauga executed a brand refresh years ago based on a similar insight of being a much different municipality than they were when it was first formed. And the fact that they wanted to proactively share this with the world, all of the great things that the city had to offer. The word proactively is a critical point for us too, because whether we like it or not, Brampton is already being rebranded by the media. From regular coverage about rising crime rates and negative driving records to our school board being under review and the 2022 study that revealed that Peel was a COVID hotspot in 2020 and 2021. The message is usually not in our favor. So why not be proactive and shape our own narrative about why Brampton is more than just headlines? Like Mississauga, our objective with a brand refresh should be to answer the question for domestic and international audiences, why is Brampton one of the best places to live, work, study, visit, and enjoy? And here's the truth. Every business in every industry at some point stops, takes stock to make sure they're evolving with the times and meeting the needs of their employees, their target audience, their existing and loyal customers, which in this case are the citizens of Brampton. Technology, business, sports, entertainment, the arts, every viable sector that we want to continue attracting and retaining goes through a purposeful evolution. The number 50 is widely a turning point, a time to reflect on a journey that has been completed, and we respect it, we learn from it, we make adjustments, and then we move on, and more confident and prepared for the best that's yet to come. So in the spirit of the flavorful energy or vibes, if you will, that we all bear witness to every time we step out of our homes and offices here in the city, I'd like to very quickly propose a new moniker that matches the moment. Brampton, the city of flavors. Sit with it for a second, take some time, savor it. I also want you to think of the various meanings of the word flavor: a distinctive quality or atmosphere, an appealing variety, and to alter the taste of something or to enhance it and make it better, all of which fit us to a T. In closing, let me just say, thanks to the great bridge building work that my parents did for many years and the corporate community connections that we facilitate every day, I've been fortunate to sit at some very influential tables where I've witnessed firsthand how the disconnect between what a brand says it is and what it actually is can adversely affect its ability to connect with its audience, build brand loyalty, and grow the business. I'm not saying that the name that I've proposed today is necessarily the right one. I'm just hoping we can all agree that it might be time to have a discussion and be intentional about curating a message that better reflects who we are now and where we're heading. Thank you again, Mayor Brown, councilors, clerk's office for the invitation. I appreciate the time today. Sorry for going a bit over. It's my first time, so.
Thank you so much, Jesse, for the delegation, and lots for us to think about. I do have questions from members of committee. Councillor Tour, followed by Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you, through you, Jesse. Thank you so much for your presentation. Just want to correct something in your presentation. It wasn't Deputy Mayor Singh at the sponsorship forum. It was myself. That was present there. Yes. So that's okay. I know he's the better looking one, so I don't want to take credit away from him. However, thank you for this presentation. I just want to ask staff maybe. We understand the sentiment that you're coming here with and the opportunity with the 50 years of the corporation. But I do believe that it was not too long ago that we went through this exercise. Does staff know when was the last time we went through a brand refresh? Because I remember this is maybe like 7-8 years ago that something like this had happened.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Tour, I don't have the exact date in mind of when that refresh happened, but it is, I would say, in the last decade.
Within the decade,
I do recall going through the exercise during my tenure here in Brampton, but I can get back to you with the exact date.
Okay. Yeah, just wanted to put that question forward. Thank you.
Councillor Medeiros.
Yeah, thank you through you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your delegation. And I guess I know when I first got elected in 2014, there was discussion around the Flower City logo. And exactly to your point, and I agree on some of your points where we're talking about innovation, we're talking about, a diverse city, young, vibrant, and you know, we have one aspect, which is our cultural heritage. And, you know, normally I would have probably referred this to staff for consideration, because I do think it's something that we as a council should think about. You know, that corporate refresh, because the flower is not necessarily, doesn't say much to me personally, understanding that it's our heritage, but I think we can agree that they're the refresh. I think the challenge that we have, and through you, Madam Chair, is I'm not sure if you've been following, there was a provincial announcement of reviewing, for example, the municipalities, so the region appeal. So I don't know where that's going. I'm not sure if we should stop that consideration. I look around the table, but I do think that that is a conversation, and maybe I'll leave it with the Chair of Economic Development to maybe have that internal conversation with staff about how we can bring the discussion forward, because I do think that when we're going away, especially we're talking about doing trade trips and all this other stuff, it's a confusing message when we're saying we're the flower city, because that to me evokes agriculture and all this other stuff. So thank you for your delegation. I think there's some, I think you made some great points, and I do think that we have to sort of brand ourselves as what, you know, so some of those characteristics, but I do think that that provokes a conversation that we need to have. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Medeiros. Any further questions? Councillor Paleshi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your delegation. Love the enthusiasm. I don't know if that's the right, you know, catchphrase for Brampton, but I think our staff will definitely go through the work to see what's the best thing for Brampton. But as this is questions of the delegations, 2 questions for you. Have you had discussions with staff on the process and what they're undertaking currently?
Very high-level conversations. I know that a couple of years ago there was some discussion around this. I'm not sure where it went. I think coming here today was really because of the 50th that's coming up. I just feel like it's a great opportunity for us to at least think about it, because the fact of the matter is we're getting branded all over the media, and it's not positive.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
Right?
I've said it before, but we've also tasked staff to start looking at, you know, what the future of Brampton is with that 50th.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, please.
Yeah, what I would suggest is that as we kind of figure out what those plans are, and if we're actually reflecting the makeup of our city, that we also work with the community as we kind of put things out for tender, look for, you know, agencies that can help us with this thinking. We actually work with people on the ground who are here in the community so that we guide it appropriately. Because I think we need something we can all kind of, you know, look up to and go, yeah, this represents my Brampton.
Yeah, for sure.
Your Brampton.
No, you're absolutely right, and I think that's a great idea. Not only leaving it with one particular, you know, agency, as you put it, but many agencies, maybe across the city of Brampton, right?
Yeah.
I think it's an undertaking for sure. So, my last question was, you mentioned that you were invited to come here today. Who invited you to come?
I submitted for delegation.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your delegation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Paleshi. Mayor Brown.
I just want to thank you for your passion for the city. You gained certainly national recognition in the media, and I know you've never forgotten your roots. And so a lot of people don't know, but you turn on the national TV, and there's so many different initiatives that you've been involved in. And so, you know, seeing your success makes me proud of another story of someone who's come from Brampton, achieved a ton, but has not forgot their roots. So I know you're passionate about Brampton, and the fact you're thinking about different ways that we can recognize this milestone, this 50th anniversary, shows how much you care. So I just want to say thank you, and looking forward to the conversations that happen around branding, because we know there's some incredible talent and resiliency in Brampton. And, you know, far too often when you turn on the news will only pay attention if there is, you know, a shooting or something negative. Good news is not as exciting. You know, you look at some of the success we've had in every sphere of sports, arts, music, and there's so much of it in Brampton. You know, there was one of the soccer players who played for Team Canada at the World Cup in Qatar, and they're doing an interview, and someone shared this with me. Maybe it was Natalie from Comms or Jason, and they said, you know, how does it feel to be on the international stage? You must be proud of growing up in Toronto. And he said, no, I grew up in Brampton.
Yeah.
But sometimes when there's huge success, you say, you know, oh, from Toronto. But
Right.
I don't think it's necessarily appreciated how much talent this city is producing in such a diverse way. So I'd love to have conversations about how we can showcase that better. So thank you for the suggestion.
Yeah, I just think there's an opportunity for us to develop a North Star that no matter how old you are in Brampton, or what culture you come from, or what, you know, economic background you come from, that people can get excited about that. And our office is like steps outside. I've been there through the pandemic. I was in there when everything was locked down. I was in there as companies closed, long-time barber shops beside me. People faded away. But the community needs it. The business community needs it. I think if we had a fresh brand for 50th, it's something all of you could really go out there and tout in the mainstream. And like you say, we have it all here. Economically, sports, arts, culture, you name it. We're very, very unique. And I think we have a great opportunity to kind of rally around that and put new, you know, motivational blood back into the city.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. And as Chair, I'll bring forward the discussion item now, since we've been discussing it anyway. So I'll bring forward that relevant discussion item, and I do have some questions for staff on this particular topic, if that's okay. So thank you very much, Jesse, for the delegation.
Thanks for having me.
And so I did do some research in terms of the branding process. Okay, Mayor Brown, go ahead. Your discussion.
So you want me to introduce this item?
Yep.
Okay, let's see, do we have something on the,
It's
oh,
on the
just,
agenda. Yeah, it's just a discussion on this.
yeah, that the staff get, I think it'd be appropriate that we have staff get back to us on what the plans are for branding. Have we thought about it as we lead into the 50th anniversary, and just have a report back to council? Maybe Councillor Santos, if you want to speak to that as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I know that Councillor Deputy Mayor Singh brought forward something related to the celebration of Brampton's 50th anniversary, and I'm not exactly sure where things are at in terms of the plans for that. But Jesse has brought up a few good points with respect to the opportunity of our brand refresh for the city of Brampton at this time. And there's this saying in brand management that you could be branded or create the brand yourself. And I think lately, over the past many years, Councillor Vicente and I have been talking about this for a long time, that we're being branded in a very negative way. And to Mayor Brown's point, it doesn't matter how hard we try with all the positive news, sometimes it's very difficult to break through. And I did a little bit of research in terms of what Mississauga did in 2014, and certainly I think they've had far more success with a more cohesive brand for their city, an updated brand for their city relative to ours. And given the level of economic development, innovation, the population, we're getting an economic development presentation shortly that's going to show us how much our city is changing, including the landscape of our city as well. And so I think now might be the time to make that consideration. I was just wondering, question to staff, is there anything that we know from Mississauga's brand refresh experience from 2014? I'll look to Jason or to Corporate Services.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, or to you, Madam Chair. I'll invite Jason to come up to speak to anything, but I don't know that we've done any research in advance of this delegation. Jason, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Commissioner, and through the chair. So, I mean, our communications team kind of stays up to date on some of these things that happen with our peers, and so I can tell you Mississauga's there's a 4-year plan, 2014 to 2017, so covered a number of multi-year plan. involved a whole brand and logo refresh and marketing plan. It was a large committee, internal plus external stakeholders that built the plan. The budget commitment for it was $40,000 that they used, but they tied in a lot of initiatives. So for example, this term of council might bring forward a new strategic plan, and that's going to happen anyways. So you tie a brand refresh into things like that that are already going to be undertaken. So those are some of the high-level details I know about what they undertook. And then to the 50th anniversary celebration, I can just mention that we will be working internally with communications events to kind of build a plan with obviously senior leadership and the entire city, so we could bring back a report on what those details would include as well.
Thank you so much, Jason. And Councillor Maderos brought up a couple of good points in terms of what might be happening or not happening at the regional level. But regardless of what happens, whatever the province decides with the region of Peel or what have you, a separation or amalgamation or whatever it looks like, Brampton is still going to remain Brampton. And residents are still going to have some connection with Brampton and an identity with Brampton. And so I think it's important for us to take a look at what that identity is, what that story is, irrespective of whether or not whatever the province does. Because certainly if you compare the identity of Mississauga, the brand of Mississauga, relative to the brand of Brampton, there is a stronger communication or like brand of Mississauga, more cohesive brand of Mississauga than there is with Brampton. And so I think if we solidify our identity, if we solidify our actual brand going into whatever it is that the province decides, it'll just be all better for the residents and all better for our business investment strategy, all better for development strategy, all better for Brampton as a whole. And I'll use an example. Even when Toronto amalgamated, Etobicoke was still Etobicoke, Scarborough was still Scarborough, downtown Toronto was still downtown Toronto, East York or whatever was North York was still North York. And so we still will have our distinct identity regardless if you compare that to Toronto. So that, Councillor Singh.
So I think we're confusing two things. We're talking about the 50th year, and then we're talking about branding the city as a whole. So so when I brought my motion, it was just about for the 50 years to celebrate our 50. So are we now talking about branding the city as a whole and redoing the brand? That's what I'm trying to get from this delegation.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Go ahead, Jesse. You still have the
No,
floor.
no. My question is this. My question: are you referring this back to staff? I guess that's what I'm asking for clarity around. And then what are we referring back to staff? I understood what the delegation was saying, but what exactly are we referring back to staff?
Yeah, so I think if I had the motion on the floor, to just refer back to staff to incorporate this delegation into the conversations we're having around branding or the 50th anniversary.
So it is okay, but are we talking about brand? So there's two aspects to this branding exercise. I'm hearing branding the whole city, right? Or are we talking about the 50-year celebration and branding that? That's two separate things. Or you can make it one big thing, but it's gone from a 50-year celebration to rebranding the whole city, which is, costly as well at this time. So I see some heads nodding. So I'm trying to be concise with what our ask is, so staff gives back an accurate report, so there's no mix-up of things.
So through the chair, the 50th anniversary piece, and if I might from the delegation, I believe that's viewed as a good opportunity for this refresh. So we can bring back, we will be doing a 50th anniversary report in spite of where the refresh direction goes. So that report and what we will do, activities for that, we'll bring forward. We could bring forward perhaps a second report or a supplementary appendix on options for a brand refresh with timelines, monetary commitments, and the like. And you're right, it would be a significant cost to the number I conveyed was just what they did it didn't entail everything that the city of Mississauga spent to put new logos on
Yeah,
everything.
because when you're
So
talking
that
about new
cost is-
logos, you're talking about changing your whole marketing material,
Yeah.
your whole published material across all the multiples of the city of Brampton. So to be honest, I don't want to go down that road. But the 50-year anniversary, I'm okay and looking at the branding around that. So I'm just asking Councillor Santos, is that what you're asking? Or you're asking to look at the whole city as a whole and rebrand that? Because I think we got to be able to separate the two.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Singh. So I think the idea is that, yes, the 50th anniversary is the 50th anniversary, but in terms of a brand refresh, that we look at the opportunity to begin the process of that and what that would look like. So, for example, in Mississauga, they went through a long process to include community consultation, understanding from different stakeholder groups how they identify and connect with the city of Brampton, etc. And whether or not Flower City is how they connect it or not. But the reality is that there isn't a cohesive brand for the city of Brampton. And quite frankly, when I tell folks that we are the Flower City outside of Brampton, and even within Brampton, a lot of those folks don't even know what that means. And some folks even associate it with other types of plants in relation to Brampton. And so that being said, because the 50th anniversary is coming up for the city, it is a really good opportunity for us to begin to tell those positive stories about Brampton and perhaps look at launching something. And whether that's a refresh of Flower City and the Flower City logo, who knows? But I think what we're asking for is a report back from staff to tell us what that process might be and what it might look like in lead up to the 50th anniversary.
Okay, so I'm okay with the report back, but I am skeptical of doing this exercise at this time. But if it's just a report back, I'll entertain it and look at the costs. Given the amalgamation talks and the costs associated with this, I would be hesitant to support a full rebrand until there's clarity around that. Thank you.
Great. And I think what's important to Councillor Singh and members of committee is what the value of that is and how that helps the city in terms of business investment and the other benefits as well. Councillor Paleshi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think I'm following now after Councillor Singh spoke to it. And you mentioned it, Jason, is the rebranding of the city as a whole is a huge undertaking. You know, we're talking about every vehicle that we own, fire. Are we changing our crest? Is now the time to change our crest? Probably. But what does that all look like? And how much of that, how much is that going to cost? Right? If it's something that's astronomical, then now is probably not the time coming out of COVID and going into a budget. But that's something that we should be looking at in budget. Do we have enough time? You know, we spoke about this at the very beginning of the term about the 50th coming up. Staff were starting to already work on what that looked like. So I think it's important to wait for that information to come back. If we think for 1 second, and you know, the Flower City means a lot to a lot of people living in Brampton. So we also have to recognize that. But if we think for 1 second changing that logo to something else, and CP24 is going to stop mentioning that something bad happened in Brampton as opposed to something bad happening at Burnham, Thorpe, and Huron, Ontario, and not mentioning the municipality like they do now on CP24, they'll mention that it happened in the city of Brampton when it's a negative. And if it happens in Mississauga or if it happens in Toronto, it's all of a sudden the intersection and no longer the municipality. So if we think for 1 second that's going to change them, I don't think it is. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Paleshi. Mayor Brown.
Close by saying it's always good to arm council with information. And I think Councillor Medeiros made a good point about what's happening with the region appeal. We don't know where that review is gonna land, and could there be boundary realignments? I was joking with Minister Rashid this morning that we might take Cooksville from Mississauga, and he could be part of the Brampton family. But in all seriousness, we don't know where all this is landing. We may in a year. Do I think our branding is dated? Absolutely. Do I think this is going to be an exercise we're going to need to engage in? Yes. Do I think we should absolutely include the talent we have locally when it comes to the creative arts? 100%. People like Jesse need to be at the table because he's brilliant and he's been able to, I think, really contribute on a national level. And we'd be crazy not to have input from local talent on that rebranding. And so I think right now, if you just simply arm council on awareness to what the cost would be, when Councillor Peleschi says it's expensive, it is expensive. And so if that process, you know, we're going to do it, it's a lasting decision with lasting legacy. And so I'd like to know the cost. And then at some point, when we have certainty to what boundaries are and where we're going, then maybe that's when we pull the trigger. But I think in the midterm, it doesn't hurt to collect as much data so that we have that information as a council. So whatever language is necessary to get as many inputs as we can, I think is helpful.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. And so there's a motion from Mayor Brown that the delegation and discussion item be referred back to staff for a report back. Correct, Mayor Brown? Report back to council.
Budget.
To report back to budget. Might be too tight.
Then you're not going to get done.
Through the chair, I can, if we, I don't know, the decision to be made on separating the items, I can bring back the 50th a lot quicker than I can bring back getting details. I mean, we're going to have to engage, I think, everybody's referenced Mississauga. It's the closest size city. The costs will be similar. I mean, I know Milton did a rebrand, but that's going to be a very different cost level than it will be for the city of Brampton. So I won't get a lot of great comparative data from them. So we can connect quickly, but I think to map out what a 4-year plan looks like and bring that all back would take a little bit of time, probably sooner than I think budget.
Yeah, and I would just add, not necessarily Mississauga being the comparison. I don't know what Mississauga's catch line is. You know, so obviously it's not as successful as, not as refreshing as we think. Vaughan, city above Toronto, like they're branding, you know, out there that sticks. And so don't limit yourself to a comparison to Mississauga. I think more information for council, the better. Okay. Timelines are not as key. It doesn't have to be budget if you don't think you can gather it by then, because budget's coming up next month. But I think that just when you can, get that information to council is helpful.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. So Councillor Peleschi to the motion.
Yeah, just lastly, thank you, Madam Chair. You know, maybe this is also a good opportunity for us to take 2023 in that year, go out to the community and say, what would you like to see for the branding of the city of Brampton? Maybe it doesn't have to be, you know, released on that year. Maybe it's a whole part of, you know, communication and working and talking to residents to find out what they actually want. Taking 2040, Heritage Heights, everything that we've done to, you know, the communication through those, especially the 2040 vision, and implementing it here with this, and trying to make, like, really blow it up and talk to everybody that, you know, lives in Brampton. Maybe that's the opportunity also. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Peleschi, and I'll agree with you on that one. That's a really great opportunity and perhaps one of the options for a process to follow as staff come back with a report on what those options might be and relative comparators. Just a quick question for clarification, Jason. Is this enough to move forward, or do you need anything more specific?
Through the chair, for the time being, I think this is enough. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. Motion moved by Mayor Brown to receive the delegation, to refer the delegation for a report regarding the City of Brampton 50th anniversary celebration and branding. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you. Good morning. Through you, Chair. I'll begin with, next slide, please. Sorry. I'll begin with the regional agenda overview. The 2023 PL budget deliberations continue at Regional Council. Staff have reviewed the regional agenda and reached out to departments for feedback and comments. Next slide, please. This week at the region focuses on presentations by the conservation authorities, the Credit Valley Conservation Authority, Toronto Region Conservation Authority, and Conservation Halton. All are adjusting their operations to reflect the recent changes in provincial legislation. Staff continue to monitor budget deliberations and remain available for any support that's required. Next slide, please. Moving on to provincial updates. Last Friday was an exciting day that brought together the City of Brampton, Province of Ontario, and the Toronto Metropolitan University to announce that the Bramalea Civic Centre has been selected as the future site of the TMU School of Medicine here in Brampton. This is another significant announcement following work between the city and key stakeholders to ensure Brampton becomes home to the first new medical school in the GTA in 100 years. This announcement builds on Brampton's intense advocacy for the city's fair share of healthcare funding. Combined with the provincial commitment to the Peel Memorial Centre redevelopment that will culminate in a second full-service hospital in the city, this will make a tangible difference for the residents of Brampton. In the City of Brampton's pre-budget consultation document, the city will continue its advocacy efforts for provincial investment in healthcare in Brampton, including to support Peel Memorial Centre's transition toward a teaching hospital to support the new School of Medicine. Next slide, please. Continuing with provincial updates, I also want to flag the Seniors Community Grant Program, which supports the delivery of programs and learning opportunities for seniors. This program awards grants up to $25,000 with the 2023-24 application window open until March 6th. While staff are reviewing the program requirements for a potential application, I do encourage members of council to share this information with community groups that may be interested in taking advantage of this funding. Next slide, please. In federal updates, the House of Commons resumed its sitting this past Monday. As flagged last week, the Government Caucus had its retreat from January 23rd to the 25th. Discussions focused on the economy and global economic slowdown with signals for more targeted supports without adding to inflation. The government indicated that pharmacare and long-term care will be key priorities in the upcoming legislative session. Next slide, please. Also in federal updates, given the significance of healthcare funding for Brampton, I want to bring to your attention the upcoming meeting between the Prime Minister and the Premiers to be held in Ottawa on February 7th. The meeting follows extensive provincial federal discussions on healthcare funding and potential systemic improvements to improve healthcare services, delivery, and outcomes nationwide. It's expected that beyond an increase in federal transfers to the provinces, the federal government will also seek bilateral agreements with each province and territory to focus on specific areas of concern in each region. The government relations team will monitor these meetings over the next week and work with our local healthcare partners to provide potential opportunities moving forward. And this concludes today's presentation.
Thank you so much, Chris, for the update. Do any members have any questions for the government relations presentation? Seeing none, I have a motion moved by Councillor Powers to receive the presentation. All those in favor, anyone opposed? That carries. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Next item is legislative services. 8.2.1, staff report New Year's Eve 2022 fireworks enforcement campaign. Do any members have any questions or comments related to this report? Councillor Singh.
Sure. I was going to ask, I saw the report. There was about 5 fines given out, I think I saw. Yep. Just wanted from staff's experience if there was a noticeable difference last year. I mean, I have anecdotal evidence. Just wanted to know what staff had to say about that and how the experience was, you know.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm going to have JP speak. He was actually out on the night driving around, so he'll give you first-hand information.
Good morning. Through the chair, we had a busy evening, let's put it this way, despite the fact that New Year's Eve is traditionally a quiet event, but we did attend a number of calls. And the fact that we had a number of our staff, including parks, recreation, public works, fire prevention, a number of our staff were deployed throughout the city. It was certainly a deterrent and help reduce the number of complaints that we received. So fairly quiet. I did not work the last year, but I can tell you that in terms of numbers, it was pretty steady throughout. Number of complaints were similar to what we've seen in the previous years. New Year's Eve, like I said, it's traditionally a slow night for us, but we had a lot of staff on hand to deter those that were thinking about using it. And the fact that we had strategically placed them throughout the hot spots that we had, I think it helped significantly.
So just for the record, I got 0 emails about any fireworks. And anecdotally, I noticed a huge difference. Maybe twice I heard fireworks about it overnight. So, but like I said, that's anecdotal. That's in my area. I don't know if any councillors have anything to add. Yes, some of them do, but I noticed a huge difference. The complaints may have been consistent, but you're right. It's normally a little bit slower on the compliance side. So, anyways, I'll like to hear what other councillors have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Keenan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank you and thank staff for the work that went into the preparation on how we were going to deploy the staff. I want to also thank the staff that came in on a stat holiday to help us enforce and educate the public to not do this. We know it's a big undertaking, and it's a learning experience for us on how we were going to be able to do it. I feel that the plan that was put forward was a good one. And thanks to the commissioners, the other commissioners who got involved with their departments to provide staff. And I felt like the approach was appropriate. It's not about trying to fine people for doing it. It's to deter them going off. And I think that's what we saw here. I did receive a couple emails, but they were more thank yous than anything else. So that is great to see. And I know that this was our first one on major nights, and it's something that we're going to build on. But I felt that it went very well, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you to everybody that was involved in pulling it off. It's something that we were told from when we passed this motion was we wouldn't be able to enforce it. And we can see that we're starting to prove some of those critics wrong. And we're just going to continue to build on that and make sure that it's getting stronger and that we're continuing to do what we said we were going to do. So again, thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Keenan, and thank you, JP, for the update. I have a motion from Councillor Singh to approve the staff report. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That motion carries. The next item is 8.2.2, which I believe was in consent. It was not. No delegations. Any members have any questions related to this particular report? Seeing none, I have a motion from Councillor Fortini to approve the staff report. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That carries. The next item is Councillor question period. Do any members have any questions related to this section of the agenda, legislative services? Seeing none, we'll move on to public question period. Mr. Clerk, are there any questions from the public related to this section?
Through you, Chair Santos, there are none online received in the clerk's office. Is there anybody here that wishes to ask a question about a decision made by committee on this section? Seeing none.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. We now have the economic development section. Is Councillor Tour available online or in person? Okay, so as Vice Chair, I'll continue on with economic development, which is item 9.1.1, staff presentation, economic development update 2023. We have Paul Aldinate, expediter, such a cool title, Economic Development Office. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of council, new members of council, and members of the public. My name is Paul Aldonate, and I'm joined here by some of my investment services staff who've just joined us over the past couple of months. We have Rina Noir and Risi Kat Hamid. So giving us a new term, we have some new members of council. We have some new data to present. We thought it'd be a good time to touch base with council today to talk about some of the economic indicators that we do track and some of the work that our investment services team does. Next slide. Investment services team works across all sectors to provide customized assistance, advice, and connections to both internal and external stakeholders. Our clients are Brampton businesses, investors, entrepreneurs, developers, site selectors, real estate agents, post-secondary education, nonprofit organizations, BBOT, BIA, you name it. Our internal clients, they range across all departments from planning to realty, finance, CEO's office. We know that in many internal discussions, economic implications need to be understood. Whether you decide to streamline a process, sell or buy land, increase DCs or decrease DCs, allocate resources in general, there's going to be an underlying economic narrative that we like to tell. Our investment services team provides one-on-one assistance to help guide investors, deliver strategic advice to help investors navigate the bureaucracy and make the best possible decisions. We provide solutions and valuable connections for investors looking to establish or expand their businesses in Brampton. The Brampton Investment Services is committed to providing the latest information on industrial and commercial marketplace in Brampton. We are the one-stop shop for business resources, information, reports, statistics, and demographics. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to go over some of the data that we do track. I know some of you have seen this before. Business counts. Business counts continue to go up from year to year. As of June 2022, we were up to almost 90,000 businesses. And as you can see by this slide, the vast majority of our businesses are small businesses with few employees. Next slide. Business license data, you can see there's a bit of an uptake on the business licenses that have been acquired here at the City of Brampton. There are a number of businesses that do require it, from fixed food premises, restaurants to personal service shops. It's good to see that the number is more than it has been over the past few years, especially since we're coming out of COVID. Next slide. A little bit of information here about the labor force we get from the labor force survey from Stats Canada. One bit of data that I will point out is our unemployment rate. In January 2022, it was 7.1, and we're now down to approximately 4.8%. You might recall at the height of the pandemic, July 2020, that unemployment rate for the region of Peel was approximately 16%. Next slide. A few indicators here on the real estate market. Next slide, please. Average resale housing prices, I'm sure none of this news is news to you because we hear about it across the GTA and across Canada. Average resale housing price has gone from almost $1,400,000 for the City of Brampton at the beginning of 2022, and by December we're below $1 million. Next slide. In terms of number of sales, same thing, no surprise here. They peaked in early spring, March of 2022. Down to approximately 200 and change by December 2022. And there's another slide that shows the comparison to what Toronto and the City of Mississauga is doing as well, and you can see those ups and downs are trending very similar to what Brampton is experiencing. Next slide. Annual vacancy rates for industrial is always something I like to point out because Brampton's hot. Okay, a lot of the industrial developers, industrial businesses want to come to Brampton. They continue to search for land wherever they can. The vacancy rates across the GTA and in Brampton are very similar. We're looking at below 1% right now for the City of Brampton. And that's reflected, it also causes the increase in the industrial rental rates, which have gone up to approximately $17 per square foot. Next slide. I think there's another slide we just missed on the office vacancy rates. Yeah, so I want to point to this one because we often hear about how office is, how it's feeling the effects of the pandemic, and there's a lot of the vacancy rates for many municipalities have gone up as a result of the pandemic and the new working model that several companies are going through right now. It's interesting how you don't see that office vacancy rate in Brampton, and I attribute that because we have low office inventory to begin with, right? So Right now, it's standing at about 1%, and you see how it's trended down over the years, going back to 2013. I mean, neighboring municipalities like Mississauga and Vaughan, they had vacancy rates up to 20% at the height of the pandemic. But we're trickling along at 1%, and in terms of Class A office space, it's very, very similar number. Next slide, please. Okay, just a few points on the planning and building stats that we get from Steve's group, who's always been very good at providing the latest and greatest on statistics from the planning and building department. Next slide. I won't go to any great detail here, just point out a few things. Building permits, we're up to 6,500 building permits of all categories for 2022. Almost 7,000. Next slide. This one is showing just a breakout of the residential new building permits by type between detached, semi-detached townhomes, multiple unit buildings, and 2-unit dwellings. Next slide. And this is a slide showing the trend over the years in terms of how much building permits we do. On the residential side of things, going back to 2016, we're a little bit lower than we did in 2021, but we're still much higher than we did between 2016 and 2020. Next slide. This is some information I'd like to point to in terms of the square footage that we've been seeing being developed based on these building permits. And when you look at the industrial market right now in Brampton and how much is being built in Brampton, it's well over 4 million square feet. And that's quite a lot more than we did in 2021, 2020, and in 2019. And in a little bit, I'll show some of the projects which you will see what's underway here in Brampton. Next slide. Here's the value, the construction value of those building permits. And again, on the industrial side of things, we're at almost $500 million in construction value for industrial compared to 350 in 2016 and 277 in the previous years. Next slide, please. This is just a quick snapshot of all the development applications we get, varying from consents all the way to the site plans and official plan amendments. It's still quite high. You know, Steve's team has been bombarded by applications. There's a lot of demand, and they're doing a great job in processing these applications. And this year, we're up to almost 1,000 different types of applications that the team has been processing. Next slide. And this is just a snapshot of what the square footage that is being processed now through site plan. Right now, there's almost 9 million square feet going through the mill, being processed here at the city of Brampton. So that tells me in the next few years that the construction on the industrial and office side of things is going to continue to trend what we've seen in the past couple of years. Next slide. Over the past year, the census data has been trickling out. They don't release it all on one day. Every few months they release some new data, so I'm just going to go over some of these. Next slide, please. So some of this data you've already seen. You know we're the youngest, or one of the youngest populations in all of Canada, standing at about 36.9 years of age. Our population is 656,000 as of mid-year 2021. Our labor force is approximately 355,000 people. Next slide. Just a bit of information on the mother tongue here in Brampton, and I don't think there's any surprises here in terms of the makeup here. And you can see how it's been trending in 2011, 2016, 2021. English continues to be the top one, but that's closely followed behind by Punjabi, Gujarati, Urdu, Hindu, Tamil, Spanish, Tagalog, Portuguese, Italian, Vietnamese, French. Next slide, please. Our labor force. So what does the labor force look like? What sectors do they work in right now? And I find this very interesting. In 2011, 2016, manufacturing was always our top sector, where people who lived in Brampton, they worked in that sector. But you can see trending upwards from 2011, 2016 to 2021, transportation and warehousing seems to be the choice sector for people who work in Brampton. That is the sector that they work in the most. Almost 55,000 people who live in Brampton work in the transportation and warehousing sector, followed by manufacturing, retail, healthcare and social assistance, professional, scientific, and wholesale trade. Next slide. This is some information that came out in the later part of 2022, again from the 2021 census, and it talks about the place of work status. So, and take this with a grain of salt, because we had, 2021 census was done right in the middle of the pandemic. But you'll see that in 2011, approximately 4% worked at home. 2016, 4% worked at home. In 2021, 22% of the people who replied to the census worked at home. Next slide. This is just some of the absolute numbers you can see here in terms of how those percentages are, what those percentages are. In 2011, 2016, there were 9,625 people who worked at home. 12,000 people worked at home in 2016. In 2021, almost 70,000 people chose to work at home rather than leave their house. And when you think about our labor force, like I said, our labor force is some 355,000 people. That's a big chunk of people who decide to work at home during that time. Next slide. Let's look at the journey to work. So again, 2021 census, you'll see that in 2016, 36% of people who left the house to go to work, that means they had a usual place of work, they commuted within Brampton to go to their job, 36%. In 2021, that crept up to 40%, which I think is a good sign from when you're building a city and all the work we do at a planning level to see that more people are actually commuting within the city's borders to go to their job. Next slide. Okay, so I'm just going to go over really quickly some of the major development projects. You saw a lot of the numbers I was presenting, and I'm not going to go into any great detail about some of these projects, but it's good to see how this is landing. So next slide. One I continue to talk about is Electra and their new 200,000 square foot facility at 177 Kennedy Road. That'll be occupied by the later part of this year. So it's 100,000. That includes 100,000 square feet of office, and it'll have between 400 and 600 jobs. Next slide. MDA, we're very proud of the work that MDA has done and what they bring to the city of Brampton. I know this council is as well. The construction of that facility is ongoing, and it looks like it'll be, at least the first phase of it will be occupied by the fall of 2023. And again, that's 200,000 square foot facility, 120,000 square foot of office, and an 80,000 square foot research lab space attached to it. Next slide. Peel Regional Police, we know they're looking at building a new facility on Mississauga Road, and I really like the way Mississauga Road is shaping up in terms of the types of clients and build form that's coming here. This is a new 200,000 square foot facility that'll be around 400, actually over 500 jobs it'll bring to this area. Next slide. This is 150 First Gulf Boulevard, another office development by Pearl Developments, and that was the theme of the first few slides, is that there is office development that's happening here in Brampton. And again, this is another one being built by Pearl Developments at 150 First Gulf. It's a 35,000 square foot facility. Next slide. So I'm just going to go over some of these other projects I've talked about in the past, but back then they were just being built on spec, right? So earlier on, 2022, I was here talking about some of these projects, and they weren't leased yet; they were just under construction. Now, within a few months, they are being leased out, and it'll be completed. 15 Bramley Road, it's almost fully leased out now. That includes 375,000 square feet of industrial and almost 30,000 square feet of office. Next slide. 100 Ace Drive in Ward 9. I know that some of the area councilors and council as a whole has been trying to get more employment in Wards 9 and 10. It takes time to get through all the EA processes to bring the servicing up there. And I'm happy to say that there's a lot more employment on its way to that area, including 100 Ace Drive being built by Panattoni. It was being built on spec, but I'm happy to say that they've procured an advanced manufacturing company. I think it's going to be a really good one too. I'm hearing some good things about what's going to happen at 100 Ace Drive, so stay tuned for more on that. Next slide. Prologis, they are building over a million square foot facility. Now this is not being built on spec. This is for a Pacific client, and they haven't revealed yet, but that's under construction and hoping to have that completed, fully constructed by the end of this year, and that's 1 million square feet. Already spoken for. Next slide. This is one by Berkshire Access in Ward 2, about 410 in Countryside Drive. There's almost 1 million square feet under development here, and I'm happy to say they're also finding companies to lease these properties as well. Next slide. Oh, I think we missed a few, but that's okay. You get the point. there's so much construction happening here in Brampton on the industrial side, on the commercial side. We continue to be very attractive to many of our large investors, including Orlando, Panattoni, Quadrio, Prologis, Triovest, and there's several others that are looking for Brampton to build more and more industrial. In fourth quarter of 2022, there was over 15 million square feet under construction across the GTA, sprinkled across several municipalities, a million here, a million there. In Brampton, that was 3.5 million. So you can see how Brampton's become a choice for many of our industrial developers. And that's it. I'll take any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Paul. And wow, that's a lot of stuff economic development's been up to. Well done. Some questions from members of council, members of committee, Councillor Majeros, Councillor Singh.
Thank you through you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Certainly there's a lot to unpackage here, and I won't bore my colleagues with, because even myself, I think there's still more to unpackage. Just specifically, just two questions, and specifically around the quality of life in my mind, or quality of life issues. So if we look at the labor force, and it was interesting, we talked about, you mentioned, 2011 to 2021, how, transportation warehousing is sort of the sector where we're employing more. And I know we're, trying very hard to get away from that barcode economy. Yeah. So, so when I think of this and I take a step back, and the narrative that I'm trying to tell residents, as we try to, go to value-added innovation and all this, but yet the barcode economy and what you've presented to us still seems to be a major, and notwithstanding, they are an important sector of our economy, but, when I take a step back and I say, in terms of guiding our work, and I would imagine staff, and I don't need an answer now because I know we're going to go in detail on budget, but when you're looking at performance indicators and everything, so try to unravel and sort of give me a layman's version or the narrative around this. Is there a narrative that we can take away that, we're still trying to change our business focus, and we're investing in innovation, knowledge-based economy, all this other stuff? Are we being successful or not, or just doesn't tell the true story? Because I do know, for example, when we talk about manufacturing, there's really high-end manufacturing, and within that nuance, there's a lot of specialization happening in high tech. So just some comments on that. I'd like to hear sort of what your interpretation, what your narrative, what's the storytelling around this? Because, it's interesting, the sector's here, but the sectors, I think what they're capturing doesn't really tell the story for us to tell our residents in terms of how we're developing. Does that make sense? Or
those are fair comments, and I'll try and answer some of those. I think one of the stories you want to tell too is about behind all the logistics and the square footage that's being developed is a tax assessment as well, right? Because right now I think you'll hear that the taxes that are being paid weighs heavily more on the residential than it does on the employment. I think it's about balance.
How about the jobs per hectare and
you want
that
balance,
argument?
right? So the value that they're putting into these lands raises that. I think the percentage of what the taxes that are coming from the employment sector, right? And that's what you want to see. So I think you can tell that story. So that's always a good news story. When it comes to, and you'll see some of the first slides that I was presenting in the projects that are going through the process right now, was not on the logistics side. It was more on, one of them was advanced manufacturing, which it's going to be a really good one. It's going to have 500 to 700 jobs, right, at 100 Ace Drive. And I think when you're able to tell that story about that parcel, it's going to be the value added that's going to come out of that company. But we can't really talk about who that is because there's a lot of non-disclosure agreements that go hand in hand with many of these transactions that happen. I talk about MDA, right? I mean, MDA is a great example of the types of jobs that we were successful in keeping and attracting them to Brampton to build their whole, their global headquarters here, right? So those are the kind of stories I would tell. I mean, that's 500, 700, actually the other day I heard 1,000 jobs they're bringing to just that location there. And they're all going to be rocket scientists, right? I mean, these are highly educated, well-paid jobs. So those are the types of jobs that we're going after, and our team has been organized to try and go after those types of jobs that are value added, well-paid, and helps with that quality of life that you're speaking of. I mean, that's part of the narrative, I think, you want to tell. And it's also, I mean, I didn't get over to talk about, because you've heard about all the work we do on the entrepreneurship side. This presentation doesn't cover all that. On the innovation district side of things, we're trying to work with the incubators and accelerators to help the small businesses grow. There's also that whole side of things as well.
No, and that's great. And again, I know it's a lot to sort of provide, and it's a lot to sort of provide the narrative around. My last question through you, Madam Chair, and just quickly, I'm interested around the sort of working outside our community. I know when we talk about, you know, work, live, and play, and, you know, for years we've been always trying to struggle that, you know, part of the quality of life issue is to attract more jobs and investment, so Bramptonians are working in Brampton. So you do see sort of a positive trend, you know, and for whatever reason, if you were to sort of dig in more to it, could be, you know, inadequate transit system, people are working more from home, et cetera, et cetera. But do you see that sort of trend? Is that direct correlation with more jobs and so on, less? Are you seeing that and more innovation happening?
Yeah, and that's an excellent observation. So that journey to work, that place of work data is really interesting to see, and it's trending upwards. So now it's up to 40% now, right? And I think, you know, the way the city of Brampton has evolved, it's when these secondary plans they get online, it's always the housing that comes first, right? The housing gets built first, and it takes time for the employment to really catch up. And when you look at Northeast Brampton, for instance, there's a large employment area that's getting ready to go. It takes time, right? You have to do the EAs, get the servicing up there. And they were bought well ahead of time by your Orlandos, your Panetones, your First Gulf. It just takes time to bring that. It always seems to be, it comes after the housing, right? And the way I'm seeing things now, I mean, we note that housing, you know, it's a housing emergency now, right? So we're not getting that housing, but I look at it as, okay, well, maybe it's time for the jobs to catch up, right? Maybe you'll start to see that balance sort of change. So that's another way to look at things when I think of the story and the ratio between jobs and housing, right? So
yeah,
that's what I'm seeing.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. It's a lot of interesting stuff, and really, you know, I think the takeaway that I get, it's great to see that staff, like these are almost like, this is almost like a guiding information that really helps us sort of look on how we be strategic, and I know we're going to be going through strategic planning and so on, but how we want to tackle some of these quality of life issues, and you know, some really good tidbits out of here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Medeiros. Councillor Singh.
You have a lot of slides, so it's going to be tough to find the slide, but it's the slide where you have the different sectors that I think health was a sector, warehousing, manufacturing. Do you know which slide number that's? Sorry.
Six.
No. Keep going down. Yeah. Down. Yeah, that one. Which number is it? Don't say the number on the.
It's right before the places that were. Yeah, right. That one.
Yeah, this one. So, just curious. So, one quick question: retail, trade, and transportation warehousing. What's the difference there?
I think what they mean by retail is retail. Your
So,
stores,
like, does
your
that mean like
businesses.
stores? Like,
Yeah.
Okay. There's that much employment in our retail. in
Yeah,
Brampton.
we have a very population-serving
Okay.
sector there, right? I mean, some of that retail stuff tends to occur naturally, right? You get the population, the retail, and the companies. and
Yeah,
businesses
naturally,
they come
everywhere.
naturally, right? So
Yeah.
that's that sector.
Okay. And secondly, I guess what focusing on sort of the future with the med school announcement and all that, how do you see that integrating more into ECDEV, and what are some of the things we're going to be doing to do that? I know it's premature, it just got announced, but I hope to see healthcare and social assistance and med tech move up in the trajectory. We won't be able to replace, like, for example, transportation and warehousing because we have such big nodes in Brampton. We'll never be able to shake that off as much as we may want to one day. You just have to go visit their sites to realize how much transportation comes into Brampton daily. But having said that, how do we grow the portion of the healthcare sector in Brampton? What are some goals that ECDEV's trying to do?
And that's a good question. I know we're establishing a committee to really get at that, the answer to that, and build off what TMU brings to us with the med school.
Yeah.
And we have staff and sector managers that are looking at the med tech sector to try and build on that, and you see companies like Medtronic that are very successful. There's also, you know, the healthcare side of things. I'm just talking about my own experience, and I'm not going to talk for some of our sector managers who aren't here today. I'm getting inquiries now with people who want to bring radiology, MRIs, different specializations in the healthcare who want to bring their practices here, and I'm trying to find space for them. I have some other investors who are looking to really capitalize on the TMU announcement. They want to be around it, and they think they have formulas and models that can build on that. I think it's a good question, and I don't have specifically all the answers for that right now, and it's something that I think we're going to really delve into as part of that new MedTech committee that this council has struck.
So in anticipation of the message, that the announcement, that was the goal. It's something I've been thinking about a lot. I've also had companies inquire just through my alumni network. I never thought they would be inquiring to me, but now they're all interested. So it's an amazing announcement, but we have to do it right. And it's something that we all need to start thinking about, because as we get to 2025 and the first set of students start coming in and the research starts coming in, it's really how do we capitalize the spin-off potential of the medical school. So it's something I guess we'll work closely on. I know council's very interested in that, and it's something we'll have to build on. Outside of that, Paul, I do want to acknowledge your work. I've personally worked with you over the last 4 years, and we worked with many companies, from the smallest to the startups to the bigger companies, and it's always been a pleasure to work with you, and you're committed to ACADEV, and it goes to the whole team, but since you're presenting, I just wanted to specifically acknowledge your work as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. And if there are no further questions, just a couple questions from the chair, if that's okay. Thank you very much. So this is just more about the industrial areas. I know there's a lot of industrial that's happening in the green fields. Do we know a little bit more about what's happening in some of the infill areas or the more mature industrial areas? And then my other question is about, and we've brought this up a number of times already before, is the barrier for the barrier of development charges for the conversion of existing warehouse and industrial space in areas like Orenda or Clarence, Rutherford. Like, how are we looking at the change? Like, have we started looking at the changes so that there's no cost barrier for us to convert some and rezone some of those spaces to repurpose? So just to redevelop some of those areas.
Good question. I'll go to the first one first, and what we're seeing in some of the mature industrial areas. And it is interesting to see some of our big industrial developers looking, like I said, under every rock to try and pick up land. I know Bentall Oak has captured about 30 acres off of Glidden, I think it is, that they're looking to redevelop. But there's also our existing companies, advanced manufacturing types of facilities that want to do something more with their site. Right, so we're seeing more of that. They want to squeeze a little bit more, add a few hundred square feet, a few thousand square feet to their facility, and I think it's up to us and our staff here to try and help them do that, because we want them to stay. They're good. They're good jobs, good companies, and I'm happy to say that some of those businesses and those companies are willing to do that. Second part of your question is about the DCs. Is what that's about, and I can start with that, Rick, and maybe you can chime in after. And what it comes down to is the change of use. So we have a difference in the DC rate between the industrial and the commercial. The industrial rate is lower than the commercial. So when you have an industrial building and somebody wants in a commercial use, whether it be a sporting academy or something to that effect, they have to pay the top up. And they come in and next thing you know, because they have to pay that top up, which is the difference between the industrial and the commercial DCs, it could be a few $100,000, right? And if they don't know that up front, they're blown away by it. Like, why am I doing this, right? So it becomes a disincentive to do something with that building. And when you look at that building in terms of what businesses are looking for today, some of our companies are staying away from it because those buildings don't meet today's industrial or manufacturing standards that some companies are looking for. So maybe you think about some of those buildings, and can you do something a little bit more? Can we allow those sporting academies to go in there? At least they're used, right? And that's not a bad thing. I like to look at that, and I think there has been, last time we did the the bylaw in 2019, we worked with, I think her name is Janet Lee, she's not here anymore, to try and remedy some of that. So I think for the first, and Rick, you correct me if I'm wrong, the first 1,000 square meters is exempt from that top-up charge, right? But still, I mean, that's a small amount and doesn't get you that far as we want to go, but I think that could be something we may want to look at as part of the next DC review.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I can just add to that, Paul's exactly right. And we will be doing a DC study. Obviously, there are other effects related to Bill 23 that will affect DC. So we will be undertaking a DC review and bring a new bylaw to council. So there will be opportunity to discuss that particular situation and how we might be able to improve it. I would agree that we're disincentivizing the rehabilitation of those older warehouses. And so it's certainly an opportunity that we need to look at.
Thank you very much. Councillor Vicente, question?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question to you, through you to Paul. So Paul, would it be possible for us to create a scheme where the change in the rates between that industrial and commercial is phased in, say, over a 10-year period as opposed to an immediate hit? Does the hit happen immediately or can it be phased in?
I'm going to point to my colleague Rick to see if he has an answer for that.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Vicente, I think under the current regime, what we would be looking at is a deferral of the DCs. So that would be an agreement that would have to come back to council on a case-by-case situation. And I don't know that in the DC Act would allow that for a for-profit organization. So it may not even be possible under the current regime, but I can certainly look into it further and get back to you with more detail.
Thank you, Madam Chair, because I think that may be, because everyone recognizes the change in the use, but it's hard for some businesses to be able to pay that increased number. If it was phased in, that might be a good solution and even better than perhaps a deferral.
Maybe I'll just add one more point on this, Madam Chair, is that you know, a lot of times people will go through the rezoning process, or they realize that their use is permitted in the zoning bylaw, and because their use is permitted in the zoning bylaw, they don't realize about this change of use aspect of it that gets tacked on at the building permit stage. Right? So they're a bit caught off guard. Right? So when we talk about change of use, there's change of use in the zoning bylaw stage, which many of you are very familiar with, through planning applications. But even beyond that, then they got to go through the building permit and they realize they got to pay this top up. So there's also a bit of a communication part of it too that we got to keep our investors apprised of when they're looking to invest in Brampton.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I just realized I had one more question. And because we're going, and I was having a side conversation with Councillor Majerus about it, but because we're going into the budget process, and I believe it's Toronto that's looking into it, is a vacancy tax. We're talking about the empty warehouses, et cetera, and some empty residential buildings as well. And rent keeps going up, clearly, in the city of Brampton. And some of these properties end up just vacant. Toronto's looking into it. I'm wondering if we've looked into that in the past and or if it's something for us to consider.
Madam Chair, just to answer that, I don't know off the top of my head whether or not that's been looked into. Is Nash online, Peter? Oh, is that right behind me? Thank you, Nash. Are you? If I can invite Nash to just to speak to whether or not we've looked into this in the past.
Through the chair, we will have to look at that through the Bill 23 and see how that might be impacted by it. At this point, we don't have enough details to be able to tell exactly, but we can definitely come back to council once the details are available.
Okay, thank you. So this is just about the vacancy tax and whether or not it's something for us to look at. Thank you very much. Councillor Fortini, you have a question.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly, when these properties are empty, go back, do they pay the property tax or they get a waive, like, a lot of the retail, usually in the plaza, if there's so much empty, they don't pay the taxes on it, or do they still have to pay?
Through you, Madam Chair. Councillor Fortini, just so I'm clear about the question, are you asking if the tax rate is reduced when the building is vacant?
Yes.
There is a different tax rate imposed prior to occupancy, in residential and commercial buildings, but once occupancy is granted, I think the tax rate remains consistent. We can, if I'm incorrect on that, I will get back to you, but as far as I know, it is consistent once occupancy has been granted.
That's residential. I get that point when you could stop the rent. I'm talking about industrial, commercial. If the building's built and I got no one leased in this building, do I still pay the same tax or do I get a reduction because there's no one in there? Industrial, commercial, not residential.
Thank you. Through the chair, in that case, there would be a reassessment of the use of the building and its functionality and so on. And based on the criteria that's applied in order to determine the property tax on that, it could be different, Councillor.
It could be different. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And there are no further questions, Paul. Thank you to staff for their responses. Motion moved by Councillor Tour to receive the presentation for the Economic Development Update 2023. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That motion carries. We're now in Councillor question period for economic development. Do any members of Council have any questions related to this section? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, we have public question period. Any questions from the public on this section?
Chair Santos, we have none submitted to the clerk's office online. Is there anybody here that wishes to ask a question regarding this section? Seeing none.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I will now turn the chair over to Councillor Singh to chair corporate services.
Thank you, Chair Santos. Moving on to the corporate services section, I held 10.2.4, which is a staff report regarding State of Local Infrastructure Report 2021. And I'll just explain to staff. I think I did read the report. I think it would be helpful to have a presentation, but I'm not going to just throw a presentation on you. What I'll do is I'll refer it to council next week, and if we could just get a brief presentation, because there's many new councilors, and this is a very important report.
Through the chair, we actually have a presentation prepared that in anticipation of some questions and so on.
If you're ready, then
if you wish and council would agree, we can take maybe 10 minutes and present that.
I just thought, given how much asset management plans have affected municipalities, especially Brampton, especially for the first year where of the new term, I think it's important we have a presentation.
In the presentation that we have prepared, chair, through the chair, is focused on some of the key takeaways that we have brought in from the current report.
So you must have read my mind. Yeah, we'll take the presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. So if we can please share it. I have my colleague with me, Manager of Asset Management, Amit Gupta, and we have online with us also Hampson Consulting that helped us with putting the report together. So I'll hand it over. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, my name is Amit Gupta, and I'm the Manager of Corporate Asset Management Office. And joined with me is Andrew Mirabella from Hampson Consulting. We have prepared, which is up on the screen, we have prepared a short slide deck, which Hampson Consulting, yeah, sorry. I'll turn it over to Andrew, who's online, to walk us through these slides.
Good morning. Thanks for the introduction, Amit, Mayor and members of council and the chair. Pleased to be in front of everyone here today. So maybe can everyone, I guess, presumably hear me. We've prepared at least the State of the Local Infrastructure Report. As to Amit's point, we have the kind of a quick presentation that I'll run through just to highlight some of the key inputs, recognizing there are some new members of council. This is quite a similar slide deck to what we've shown previously as part of the corporate asset management plan, but as I mentioned, there's some new faces, so it would be good to kind of give a bit of a refresher. So we'll go to the next slide. I can just run through the kind of the valuation. So generally speaking, one of the key outputs of the State of the Infrastructure Report, which comes to council annually, is to identify the value and condition of the city's infrastructure. And the reports have been prepared generally consistently since 2016. The current value of the city's asset base is about $7.7 billion. And we see here the pie graph shows the representation of that $7.7 billion, where it's being distributed. And, transportation services and facilities are really the two big factors here of driving the valuation of your city's infrastructure. Transportation is pretty unsurprisingly $3.3 billion, representing over 40% of the valuation of that $7.7 billion. Facilities representing a further $1.5 billion at 20%, and stormwater infrastructure at 18% at about $1.4 billion. Transit, parks, and the remaining service categories also are included there. I just want to be clear in the way the valuation and the service categories are presented here. You might look at it and say, oh, recreation seems low. That's because all the actual recreation facilities themselves are captured under the facilities category. So there's just the way the assets are categorized and kind of aligns with the way the asset management program and the way the city plans for repair and replacement is carried out. So the value has grown, consistently year over year, and the value in today is $7.7 billion. If we go to the next slide, kind of just show you the overall breakdown of the conditions, and we won't get too into the details on that right table, but generally speaking, I think there's a couple of really good points here that the city should be cognizant of. One, overall, the city's assets are in good condition, and that's kind of the big ticket story. The very good condition assets and the good condition assets make up the bulk of that pie graph. Over 80% or about 80% is from those two specific categories. Your fair asset categories are nearly 15%, and there's about 6% of the assets between poor and very poor condition. Your very poor condition category is less than about 1% or $82 million. And we've quantified in the table where some of those assets are kind of quantified to be in that very poor category. A lot of that is, just to stress, it's assets that are particularly in an age-based assessment for the purpose of asset management. A lot of them are continuing to be in working order, but just from the methodology perspective, that's what's taken. In other instances, a lot of the ones that are actually in very poor condition are being addressed and managed through the budgeting process and will then continue to be updated. As obviously in the next year's report, there'll be a shift of those assets. One of the things that I like to see when we're doing this is your very poor category as it stands now is very much in line with, in a manageable sense, of what you're actually doing from an infrastructure levy and infrastructure funding perspective, where a lot of those assets itself are captured within your annual budgeting framework from a dollars perspective. So that share, that relationship of those assets is very much under control. And your assets are very much in good working order, as it shows by the timeline here. So somewhat of a testament to the city's asset management program and practice.
Could you just repeat that, what you said about the budgeting and to the
sure.
Repeat that, sorry, just a little.
Like the budget itself, you have a 2% levy in place, which already captures it's upwards of $70 million annually in terms of your 2% levy of what it's generating. And that already almost captures from an annual basis, that very poor category in its entirety. So that's one of the things that when we're looking at this, it's good to see that at least from a management perspective, your very poor assets are not overrepresented of what you're actually doing from a financial standpoint on an annual basis.
So in other words, the poor assets are budgeted for through the levy and will be taken care of. Is that what I'm hearing? Sorry, I'm trying to understand that point.
Yeah, in short, you're managing it and you have the ability to address those assets as needed.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So if we go to the next slide, we did want to kind of break out that slide in a little bit more detail, just showing the distribution of those conditions by service area. And we see here, obviously the overwhelming share in virtually all categories is your good to very good condition, which is representative of the entire pie that we saw on the previous slide. Some asset categories have assets that are in poor or very poor condition. We get into areas such as recreation, where a lot of the assets are age-based from a methodology perspective, which is what's driving some of those very poor condition categories. But your big ticket assets, particularly ones that are engineering related, transportation, stormwater, and facilities, there's a very high share that are in good to very good condition. So if we go to the next slide, just from an asset management perspective, one of the things that came as a new element, I guess you can say, in this most recent camp last year was trying to quantify the total life cycle cost of the assets. And that looks at the cost of operating and maintaining, capital renewal, replacement, and some of the non-infrastructure solutions. And we also look at expansion-related activities as well. And when we look at the total life cycle costing, it is, trying to gather as much information about not only just the replacement, but what happens in some of the intermediary periods of when we're actually renewing your assets or operating and maintaining them. And to be clear, when we talk about the O&M costs, it's the maintenance costs associated with capital assets. If we wanted to break that down a little further as an example, the aquatics leaders in your facilities are not considered the operations and maintenance costs of the asset. It's going to be, the people who are actually maintaining the facilities incorporated within your operating budget. Needless to say, our total existing assets, our life cycle cost over the 10-year period is about $4.6 billion, and our life cycle cost for the expansions a further $1.2 billion to give us a total $5.8 billion component. The pie graph looks at obviously the total amount by service category. Transportation services, similar to the replacement value, has a pretty high share, or the highest share. Interestingly, when we look at things like transit, didn't represent the largest share of your replacement value, but from an operations and full life cycle costing standpoint, it is a greater share, and there's quite a bit of investment that goes into the at least plan for the renewal needs and the rehab needs of those buses, and that's what's driving that. And I would expect as the asset management program continues to further evolve, you'll see the kind of similar programs in place for a lot of the other service categories itself. So if we get to the next slide, it kind of looks at the calculation of the infrastructure deficit, and I guess I just want to be clear on, there's obviously a calculated infrastructure deficit and what the funding needs are. We've identified this graph looks at specifically some of the existing assets, and so kind of hiving out those expansion related activities that I mentioned in the previous slide. Our total expenditures are about $4.6 billion. Our total revenues related to asset management are about $3.8 billion, and just to simplify, that leaves us a gap of about $81 million a year. But the gap is broken down into two components, and the unfunded share is about $560 million. And what that means is that there's going to be growth revenues that come along as the city continues to expand, and it's likely that the city will continue to divert some of those funds. Obviously to the existing assets and your existing pressures, where a lot of those new assets that are required because of growth are still going to be new in its infancy stage, and you continue to plan for them similar to the way you're planning for your existing asset management requirements today. But this gap, obviously, it's relative to the $7.7 billion in asset value that we have and the life cycle needs. Overall, it strikes the picture of the city of Brampton is obviously doing its share in terms of your existing funding levels, and you're continuing and planning to continue to do that over the long term. But it does also kind of help support that, hey, in order to kind of bridge that gap, funding from upper levels of government is likely needed and would certainly be welcomed in order to continue to kind of bridge that gap. But you are certainly managing your existing assets in a fiscally sustainable manner. And, I think there's a lot of, things that we can do going forward in terms of managing and improving levels of service and managing risk as part of the overall asset management program that kind of will help bridge that gap over the longer term. So if we kind of go to the next slide, I'll kind of cap off. I know we had about a couple more slides here. There's two more there that I'll go through in a little bit more detail. There's a gap that's been identified And certainly there's different ways of managing and closing that gap. I think what I want to instill here is that there's kind of financial and non-financial mechanisms, and I think the city is obviously looking and staff are looking to explore all mechanisms to close the gap and not just the financial solutions. So this looks at the non-financial approaches and obviously improving data quality, updating and managing our levels of service, looking at implementing a standardized risk framework, and kind of coordinating any particular projects with upper levels of government or the region appeal or utility companies in order to manage costs. Those are all very viable ways of trying to close that gap, and that will happen as you evolve and you kind of mature your asset management program going forward. On the financial side, on the next slide here, there's some obviously funding strategies that we can look at, and the kind of maintaining your existing funding level sources for your 2% infrastructure levy and your 1% infrastructure levy. Those are critical to achieving that gap, and those are certainly kind of been employed here and continued on in the 10-year forecast. But helping to support that would seeking funding support from upper levels of government, and you've been obviously continued to do that, and we would expect that the city, as time goes on, continue to seek for assistance and help that in that partnership to deliver the best quality service with the dollars available. And then lastly, I'll just cap off with our radar graph here. So on the next slide, just looking at the overall city's maturity assessment. Recognizing that asset management is very much a multi-year process. The 2016 camp is kind of looking at the green lines there in terms of different components of where we were at. When we did the 2021 camp, just recently when we presented the final report in June, the city has evolved since that 2016 corporate asset management plan was put in place. And the red line at the outer rim is the target on all those different categories. So the city's currently expanding out and getting towards the targets, and different areas are at a much more mature level than others. But generally speaking, there's a few years to go, and there's the city has certainly put the tools in place and the motions forward here to get to that target beyond 2025. And obviously that is with the intention, and that'll help inform a much more evidence-based decision-making model and framework to kind of help you better make decisions and help your decision-making process going forward. So progress is being made, still more to go, and I think you're on the right track to do that, and this report is one of those elements in order to help you bring you there. So, Councillor Singh, I hope that was a detailed but high-level enough presentation for you.
That was great. That was exactly what I was looking for. Thank you. And I'll pass it on to Councillor Fortini first, followed by Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can we put slide 3 on, Peter, please? Do you mind? I see there, when we look at the port facilities, or you got the 7 recreation facilities, this captures the ones like Howden Recreation Center we tore down and Victoria Park, because we've been tearing things down, but I don't see any things being built lately. Is that part of that, the 7 recreation centers?
So through the councillor, perhaps I can pass this question to city staff and Amit, who has maybe a better handle on some of the specific facilities. But generally speaking, they are conditions were developed using the FCI calculation, which were based on the building condition assessments provided by the city. So it would take into account assets as of year end 2021 as they stood. So if anything has happened since then, it wouldn't particularly be captured. But I'll let the city staff comment further on that.
Through the chair, we have prepared a list of facilities that are included in that very poor condition, which we could circulate right after the meeting.
Yeah, but that's been torn down. That's why I wanted to ask if it was captured. The 7 facilities, now it's no longer there.
So through the chair, anything that is disposed wouldn't be in that list.
It wouldn't be there. The thing is, when we look at these properties in poor, conditions or very poor, do we go through this every year just to look around, or we do this every 10 years? Because I remember last year I had to, as I drive around Knightsbridge Senior, I noticed all the shingles are missing. And we should, you know, from $100,000 damage becomes 300 or $1 million with the mold and drywall. If you drive around Riverstone now, it's been 4 months the shingle's been missing, and I've been noticing that, and I'm just waiting to see how long we're gonna notice it to replace the roof there. They're all blown away. So how long do we actually go around these facilities and check what's wrong for the facilities?
Through the chair, we frequently or routinely do building condition assessments, and those building condition assessments outline the renewal and the rehabilitation needs of each facility. There is a capital project plan based on those BCAs that is developed, and depending on the severity of the need, there is a budget ask made for those facilities.
Yeah, and, you know, when it comes to the roof, I think, you know, these are important things, and I think, like I said, like Riverstone there's a lot of shingles are missing. It's been a while.
Through the chair, Councillor, if I can just explain, when we looked at the very poor items, we found that in many cases, what's left in the very poor category are actually items that are either maintained in a way that they are left to failure. So they're that type of an asset where they don't have to be replaced in advance of failure and so on. Or in some cases where things that were so far in a age-based assessment for them. So a lot of the items that you're talking about would be through the regular maintenance program within the facilities and so on, that they would be looking at and assessing what's the required investment in them and the budgeted capital for them.
Yeah. So through the budget, where it says very poor, we're going to add that to our budget, because if they're very poor now or poor, it's just going to get worse. It's going to cost more. Are we going to add that for a discussion so we can repair those?
So, Councillor, through the chair, definitely, if they are considered by the team that's maintaining them as something that needs to be addressed, they will absolutely be on top priority for our capital program. As I said, a lot of the items that are in that category are actually items that are typically left to fail and replace. So there is like a certain budget that's dedicated to those and so on. But we wouldn't be leaving them if they require maintenance routine.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, it's no sense building new rec centers. We got those poor. We're just going to fail, and we're just going to keep falling behind if you don't keep the maintenance up. Also, these other rec centers, like we got Howden and Victoria Park, we tore down. It's no sense moving on if we like that. At least when we had it, I know the pool was in bad condition, but the rec center was being used by seniors and Snapsall and another place. Now, we tore it down to build, and so it's no sense carrying on unless we catch up. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, you also had a comment before asking about the infrastructure levies, the 1% and 2%. Just want to say that because of the high inflation that we have witnessed through this assessment and so on, that actually emphasized more the future need for higher replacement values and so on. So that actually indicates that the need for those infrastructure levies and so on is really a high priority given the inflation that we have witnessed recently.
Thank you. Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you through Chair Singh, and thank you for holding this item. You kind of answered one of my questions I was going to ask, but I want to sort of understand, and again, you know, if I recall, and I could, you know, because this is a good news story, good presentation, but I recall that we reduced the infrastructure levy. As we reduced the infrastructure levy, to my surprise, we seem to have improved, I guess, our state of repair over the last couple of years. And, you know, so just doing simple math, we're collecting less money, but our performance has improved in our asset management. And I know before, and if I recollect, and I could be wrong, through you, Mr. Chair, a couple of years ago, when we were having the discussion around the asset management, I think you had made comments, or someone, staff had made comments, and I vaguely, that that we're gonna go back and review the state of condition because some of the, I guess, terms or the definitions or the analysis wasn't as accurate as that it could be. Am I wrong? And maybe take me to the journey on how we're collecting less money. We did, because I just don't want this to be an exercise, and I could be wrong, that, you know, I just want that assurity that by us redefining terms and taking a relook, that we just didn't fudge the descriptions to sort of say, look, this is not such a great need for our infrastructure levy. Do you know what I'm trying to say? So base me through the rationale on, and then after I guess what we're proposing, we'll discuss that at budget, that this is adequate going forward, because it is a good news story, like what this is. It's just take me on that journey, how we got here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Through the chair. If we can go back just a slide above, please. Do we have the slide where it shows the... Okay.
I think it's the next slide.
So, Councillor, the gap has increased, and it didn't decrease. And a big part of why it increased is that part of it is, like you said, we have been now understanding better our condition of the assets and so on. That could have taken us either way based on like what the actual data is. But the bigger portion is the inflation this year increased the value of the assets themselves, which increased the overall gap that we're trying to address and so on. So the data has been contributing as part of that. The bigger part is the inflation this year. And then there is, of course, our new assets that we have added. And if we don't, I don't see the slide here, but the breakdown is about 20% came from the data and the increase, about 20% came from the new assets, and the remaining 60% came from the inflation and the value of the assets themselves that in the future will have to be replaced and so on. So it actually did increase the gap, and that's why we're saying that it's really important that we continue on the path that the council has been guiding us through a 2% infrastructure levy and a 1% transit levy.
Yeah, and through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the explanation. I know we'll get more in detail during the budget, because I do, you know, Councilor Fortini does make a good point. I think this council's got to make some decisions, especially when you get to that state of very poor, and that's, I guess, for, you know, staff to let us know in terms of recommendations. Do we continue with that project or not? I mean, with that asset, or is that something that we look at what we're going to do? My last question, and through you, Mr. Chair, the provincial oversight on this, because I know this is a legislative requirement. Just for my knowledge, how does that sort of work? So we submit this to the province, or we submit copies. Is there an actual back and forth where there's questions for them to understand our asset management plan? Is there a checks and balance, or is it just simply legislative requirement and check the box, we've received Brampton's asset management plan?
Through the chair, we just received an acknowledgement that we have completed it, but hearing from neighboring municipalities, for example, Town of Caledon, they did receive some questions back and forth. So I don't know if there is an audit process that they're just selectively looking at these AMPs, but it seems like they are keeping an eye on it.
Yeah, and through you, Mr. Chair, and that was my question, because when this became a legislative requirement, and I remember I attended a couple of conferences, you know, back in another day, I was chair of corporate services, was exactly to look at the legislative requirement, what was going to be required from us. I was always curious, is there actual audits that take place at municipalities, and do they actually come in and take a look at it? So I guess there is some teeth to this. It's not just simple an exercise. The province is actually looking at these in a detailed manner, ensuring that the information we're providing is consistent and accurate. Is that fair to say?
Through the chair, that's my sense, talking to the other municipalities.
Excellent. Thank you for your work. This is really good, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And seeing no other questions, I'd like to speak. First is, how do we compare to other municipalities? What do you see from out there in the GTA?
Through the chair, we compare really well, but I will let Hemson comment a little more in detail, because they have the exposure to other municipalities that can bring that perspective.
Thanks, Nash, and through the chair. To kind of build on that point, I think from a comparative standpoint, your generally speaking, your conditions fare quite well, and the infrastructure and the assets you have are obviously in good condition, and it really kind of varies from place to place. Obviously, the age of the municipality when infrastructure came online and the type of services that you provide obviously kind of influence that. And then from what you're doing on the financial side and your funding perspective, a lot more municipalities are coming on to the tune of dedicated infrastructure levies, and that's something that you already do, which is a good news story. Obviously, you have your 2% infrastructure levy for your normal assets, and then you have a dedicated one for transit, which is very much specific to kind of look at kind of balancing those needs of expanding your services and maintaining that assets. And you've seen transit growth unlike many other municipalities, so you are kind of unique in that respect. So I think you're kind of in my experience, kind of on the better end of things, and kind of leading the pack on some of the sense in terms of what you're doing and the state of your assets.
Okay. All right, that's good to hear. And what's the difference between poor and very poor? Like, how do you identify that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The very poor assets are generally the ones that are kind of right at the end of their useful life or exceeded their useful life, that are more in tune to replacement.
Sorry, can you repeat that again? Sorry, there was some, yeah.
Yeah, the ones that are in very poor are at the end of their useful life or exceeded their useful life, and they're identified kind of more along the lines of replacement in the immediate term. Where ones that are in poor condition, they still have some useful life left in them. There are some deficiencies in their actual asset itself, but they're obviously still in service. But they should be put on the radar for replacement in the shorter term.
Okay, and the challenge with the asset management plan is you can't look at it in just 1 year in isolation, because there's so many factors, inflation being one, as we learn more about our buildings, as there is innovation. So it's challenging. It's like you're trying to hit a moving target, right? So the gap might be one way this year. 2 years later, it might be something else because inflation is down. So it's hard to drive decisions from this year for the next. I think we're looking at a 10-year cycle time horizon.
That's correct.
And it's going to change every year. That's just the reality of it. Sometimes it's going to look more positive. Sometimes it's not, and then that's just the way this works. But I'm happy with the direction we're going. So there's no major issues there. But to maybe even make us look even better potentially is does this report incorporate recent changes of ownership of buildings?
So this report would only capture any changes that were kind of as of year end 2021.
Are we talking about civic building?
Yes.
Yeah. No, that data didn't yet be built into this.
That didn't get built into this.
There is a bit of delay.
Yeah, that's potentially because that would be off of our capital asset management plan.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely, Jeff.
So maybe that's something we should have incorporated by the time we get to budget, so it's even more accurate, our decisions at that time.
We'll try, Councillor. A lot of this data builds on databases that feed into each other and so on.
Yeah.
So isolating one building, we can try to look into that, and we'll bring whatever we can.
Sure. Okay. I'm just thinking because some of the conditions, because it's older, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Much older.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all. Oh, Councillor Medeiros has some questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. Not so much a question through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. The one thing that this, jogged my brain when Councillor Singh or Chair Singh was talking, when we're doing the repair, and I think this is a question for budget, when we think about our environmental sustainability targets, are we looking at our buildings, and when we're repairing it, we're trying to really meet our sustainability and environmental goals of our corporation? Because And again, I don't want to bore us here, and I don't want to take up your time, but I do think for the budget, it would be good, or at one time, I wouldn't mind if staff can sort of, more evolve on our repair of our buildings, and if we're doing it in a sustainable manner, and maybe give some examples of what we've done. So I don't know who, we're on the bench that would reside with, but I leave it there as a comment, but I think that's something I'd like to look at during budget. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Maderos to approve the recommendations for staff report 10.2.4 regarding the state of local infrastructure report 2021. Anybody opposed? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries. Moving on to 10.2.8 as a staff report regarding important and commemorative dates 2023. I'm the one who had held that, and I just asked that we refer it to council next week. I just want to do some, and I talked to Councillor Thura as well, want to do some stakeholder engagement before approving this. So I'll move a referral motion. Is anybody opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that staff report is referred to council next week. Moving on, 10.3.1 was covered with the delegation.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Committee added to consent and then reopened 10.2.9, the tourism sponsorship program.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to hold down. Yeah, I'm just on this section, then so I'm gonna hold down 10.2.9 and 10.3.2 because they were at the request of the mayor. And 10.3.1 was covered, okay? So just to repeat for the public, we're gonna hold down staff report regarding 2023 tourism sponsorship program. And we're gonna, already did 10.3.1, which was a discussion item at the request of Mayor Brown regarding City of Brampton 50th anniversary celebration and branding. And we're also gonna hold down item 10.3.2, which is a discussion item at the request of Mayor Brown regarding auto thefts. So moving to councillor question period, do any members of council have any questions? Seeing and hearing none. Moving on to public question period, do any members of the public have any questions? Hearing and seeing none, I will ask that we go on a lunch break. It is 12:07, so we'll come back at 12:45. 12:45, 30 minutes? Yep, 12:45, okay. All right. Council is adjourned.
Dennis, do we want to do our first?
All right, members of the committee, we're going to resume the meeting. We're now entering into the Public Works and Engineering section. The next item that we need to deal with is item 11.3.1, a discussion item at the request of Mayor Brown regarding speed bumps and traffic control in the vicinity of Van Kirk Drive, Van Scott Drive, and Potter's Wheel Gate in Ward 2. Mayor Brown?
So, and I believe Councillor Pleshy and Councillor Brar will speak to this as well. We've had some speeding and reckless driving issues that have the neighbors, the residents in these areas, I'd say very frustrated, and they want to see what technology can be used to help. And so the hope is that we've been rolling these out across the city, that we could look at this year's budget, whether we can accommodate these additional locations. I believe Councillor Pleshy may have some additional locations in Ward 2, and I know all councillors do, but one of the ways we hear about these areas where where they become sort of freeways is the feedback of residents. And so I think it actually is helpful. I know Councillor Keenan, you know, we were hearing a lot about, there was a few streets in for example, Elizabeth Street that we heard about in Wards 3 and 4. I know Councillor Medeiros, there was the Peel Village racing that we worked on last term of council. And, you know, if we don't live in the neighborhood, we're not going to hear about the street racing that occurs. As residents are here first, and we've had correspondence from these neighborhoods sent to myself and Councillor Pleshy and Councillor Brar. And so I want to get them on the list of areas that we're looking at. Maybe we need to add more resources in this year's budget for these speed calming measures, because it is, you know, we hear a lot about big issues, and we talk about big issues, you know, we're talking about the med school or the hospital expansion, but sometimes it's these little issues like street racing that affect someone's day-to-day lives on the most acute way. And, you know, racing in residential areas there's not many issues I've heard such a volume of feedback on. And so this just happens to be in Ward 2 today, but it really is a problem across the city. And so whatever we need to do to add this to the list, I'd like to do so. And if it means referring these locations to our list for budget, then I'm happy to do that. And I'll look to council to how we move this forward.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brown. So we have a motion as a result of the discussion. I have a speakers list. Councillor Pleshy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for bringing this forward. You know, I guess I'll start with, and for members that are returning, you'll roll your eyes because of the amount of times that I talk about Richvale and the schools that are on Richvale, the proximity, nowhere else like it. I've researched it in Peel. But expanding on that, it's these cut-through streets that drive residents absolutely crazy. I think that, you know, when we plan areas in Brampton, we're certainly looking at that now. But when you look at, you know, Ward 2 specifically, very well-established, older community, much like other areas in Brampton, these cut-through streets that people are trying to get away from intersections, in particular, you know, Wanless in Hurontario, Mayfield in Hurontario, Sandalwood and Kennedy Road. So we heard loud and clear from a lot of residents that had gone through the, when we went and did the, make motorists uncomfortable and narrowing the lanes and doing all kinds of stuff. And I think, you know, that was a good strategy in the beginning when we were looking at it, because that's exactly what it did. And for anybody that's traveling on these roads with narrow lanes now, you know, they are uncomfortable, so they do slow down. But when you're traveling on those roads every day, sometimes twice a day, you're no longer uncomfortable. You're very, very used to the narrow lanes, and the speed is creeping up, especially in front of Terry Fox, Lagerquest, and Sacred Heart, all three schools that are within a stone's throw from each other. So I know that, you know, last council put put some, allocated some money in the budget per wards to implement speed bumps throughout the city. And it was, difficult for me at the time when I was trying to get speed bumps in certain areas, but, I didn't have both counselors for that area didn't really see eye to eye on the needs of certain communities, which is unfortunate. But, now Councillor Brar and I have had the discussion many, many times about speed bumps in areas, and we're both, fully on board in implementing them in the areas that Mayor Brown had mentioned, but also on Collingwood Avenue, Robert Davies Drive, Cresthaven, Sun Forest, Conestoga, Richvale. So I'm not sure how much budget we have left in that little pot that each member of council or each ward pairing got, but I'm looking to use that up and also to start the process on trying to get speed humps in these areas. And we started with speed bumps. We know that that's an issue even for snowplows. But speed humps is something that a lot of other municipalities use. They seem to be able to work well with our snow removal system. So I think speed humps is definitely the way to go, and look forward to when this comes back to Councillor Barr, myself, and include the mayor, and when we can get these implemented. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pleshy. I have a speakers list: Councillor Power, Councillor Fortini, and Councillor Santos. Councillor Power.
Hi. Thank you. Through the chair, I agree with the mayor, and it's across all wards, right? We've got a number, and I'm sure we can talk to each ward, and you've got a number of select streets that are in need of some type of speed calming, or some courts that are in need of speed calming. Maybe what I suggest is that maybe a couple streets from each ward be mentioned for the next pilot.
Is there anyone who can provide a response?
Hi, Councillor Power. This is Rob Gasper speaking. Yes, we can definitely, we would like to meet with each ward councillor pairings to go through the specific streets, but we are bringing forward to each ward pairings some traffic calming initiatives that we want to bring forward.
Okay, Councillor Power, anything further?
I know there's a couple streets in our wards, like Massey Street is massive. I can almost guarantee I get an email a day for Massey Street, as well as Greenmount. We've had a number of infractions. I get videos nonstop about cars blowing stop signs. Even our own city vehicles are blowing stop signs in a three-way stop area. So if we could maybe speed that up and look at it for next budget.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Fortini.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I know we had the budget. How much did we receive per ward? I think it was 250,000 when we were talking about this per pair warding for the budget.
Through the chair to Councillor Fortini, I think the amount was 40,000 for each ward pairing.
Okay, 40,000. So we haven't seen. So the one that Greenmount there, there was a big accident. It's a sharp turn. We talked about that, and I think the mayor knows about it. That 3 cars will keep going on lawns. They put the big rocks about 2 or 3 years ago, and that big accident that the car flipped over. Also, the rocks weren't there. They were going to go in the living room, and one of the person died. I think that's a very dangerous street. So I like to sit down before the budget, and myself with Rod Power, we do have, like, Massey Street's another one where the school is. That's a straightaway. We get emails there all the time, and we'd like to have some in our ward too. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Next, Councillor Santos.
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair, and support the motion. I think that as we're implementing a lot of these traffic calming measures, whether that's narrowing the road and putting in bike lanes to narrow the road, or speed humps, or stop signs, or slow down signs, and speed cameras, that it's important for us to remember when residents complain to us that cars are moving too slow and now there's too much congestion, then that really our objective is traffic calming, Vision Zero, and protecting the vulnerable users, especially in community safety zones. So Councillor Vicente and I have had piloted on some of our streets the speed humps on top of the bike lanes, on top of other speed calming measures, and they have worked. But now residents are complaining that cars are moving too slow. And at the end of the day, the priority is always going to be safety. So I just wanted to point that out. And I also wanted to ask a question about automated speed enforcement cameras. The City of Toronto, I believe, are getting more. I don't know if it's worth us looking at increasing, because right now we only have 10, right, Commissioner Morrison?
Yeah, we had a discussion about this the other day through you, Mr. Chair. Is Kevin Miniker on the line? I would like to bring Kevin in because he has more detail for us.
Through the chair to Councillor Santos, we have 50 ASC cameras. We did have the most in the province until Toronto, I believe, just added 25 more to their, and they now have 75.
And
So we're second in the province now.
Right, thank you. And it's the province who gives it to us, right? Is that correct, or do we own it? We own it.
The ASC, through the chair to Councillor Santos, the ASC cameras are leased through a company called Redflex.
Okay. So the speed cameras have definitely helped. And so maybe on some of these other key streets that folks are concerned about, we look at putting in some speed cameras. Because Kevin, how long is the rotation, or does it depend?
Through the chair to Councillor Santos, the intention was to rotate the 50 cameras through the 200 community safety zones every 3 months. What a lot of the municipalities have realized since the implementation of ASC is that the amount of work that it takes to move these cameras around is quite significant. And so we have not been able to reach that goal. So if we do consider additional cameras, we would be recommending more permanent or semi-permanent cameras at locations that we would think would need them permanently.
Okay, great. And so through you, Mr. Chair, back to Kevin and to staff, then maybe as part of the report coming back, a recommendation on what some of those streets might be where permanent speed cameras should just stay and not move at all. Okay, thank
Through
you.
the chair to Councillor, just through the chair, to Councillor Santos, we do have a priority list through our neighborhood traffic management guide where we do measure the speeds, cut through traffic volumes, collisions, and that gives us a priority list of streets that we recommend for traffic calming every year. So that list would definitely be something we'd be looking at if we were to get more cameras.
Thank you. And then through you, Mr. Chair, back to Kevin, we also have, we're piloting a reduction in some of these local roads to 40 kilometers an hour on some of them, and let's see how that does in terms of reducing speed limits on, I know Councillor Vicente and I have a couple of streets where we're piloting that as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Next, Councillor Paleshi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Councillor Santos, I think that's, speed enforcement and the cameras are probably one of the best tools right now. We have currently 50, 10 per ward pairing, and it's very difficult for Councillor Brar and myself to say, because we have probably 30 locations that need them, but it's very difficult for us to say, well, keep these ones here permanently. We have to keep cycling them and change the behavior. So going back to, I believe that and Mayor Brown might remember this, is the request was that we have 200 cameras throughout the city. Now, there's a balance though, because at what point does that start becoming, revenue? We were never, and I never wanted ASC cameras to start being a revenue tool. I always wanted it to be revenue neutral so that I can say to residents that, if you got a ticket, it's neutral to the city of Brampton, and therefore, too bad you shouldn't have been speeding in a school zone and putting the lives of our children in your hands. So if we have an issue with and from my understanding, there is an issue with the supplier, and I also understand that Toronto seems to be getting their cameras, because I believe they're up to 200, then that's an issue for me, and maybe it's time to find a new supplier. Or maybe it's time to have that extra level of protection. If we need to go out to a different supplier, then we should do that. I don't want to be held back by, I know there's more suppliers out there, so I don't want to be held back by the fact that, Toronto's getting their cameras and we're not getting our cameras.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councilor Pleshy. If you indulge us for maybe a week or two more, we have a working group working on this. We aren't prepared to talk publicly about it because we still have a lot of details, but we are coming very close to the point where we can talk to the chair and the vice chair of legislative services to do a more wholesome briefing and give you where we're at now and what direction we're going to go. Okay. And I think it would answer a lot more of your questions.
Okay, great. And, ultimately, I think, speed humps and, planning, we're going to be asking developers when they start a community that these are where the speed humps are going to need to go, because we know that those eventually are going to be the cut-through traffic, right? Not the courts or the crescents, but the ones that you can get around a major intersection, and that's got to be a must when developers and builders are building communities, and they're building these communities with these roads that you can use to get around, congestion. So that's going to be, I think, one step, but the other step is speed humps in the communities now. I think it's less expensive than the actual cameras and the operations of the cameras. So yet another tool that we need to implement more often, especially through this budget, is speed humps throughout the city. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pleshy, if the chair may just speak, just to add a comment on top of what Councillor Santos mentioned, and I'm sure all members of council would agree that the speed humps were one of the most requested items from our residents, and in fact, they are really thrilled to see them being installed on those selected corridors. And I've tried them myself. They're really effective. They really do make you slow down and drive through that particular neighborhood with greater care. And so I am very pleased to see them and very supportive of seeing that expanded across the city. So members, we have a motion moved by Mayor Brown that speed bumps and traffic control in the vicinity of Vankirk Drive and Scott Drive and Pottersville Gate Ward 2 be included within the 2023 budget considerations. All in favor, any opposed? That carries. Next, we'll move on to a deferred item, a discussion at the request of Mayor Brown regarding auto thefts. So we're speaking about cars a little bit long. Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Councillor Vicente, and thank you for Council's indulgence to talk about an issue that is not necessarily within our jurisdiction, but I feel we need to step up on. Auto thefts have become a crisis in Canada. Since 2019, it's up 97% in Peel Region, 97%. In York Region, it's up 134% since 2019. In Montreal, 120%. Pretty much, you take any major urban area in Canada, and auto thefts are happening at a pace that we've never seen before. There's lots of reasons for that. Sure, we need more police officers. We're doing our part. We're adding 70 new police officers this year in Peel Region. There's challenges with the revolving door nature of the justice system. We've done some advocacy on bail reform. There is certainly systemic problems with CBSA and a lack of resources for our ports. We've become one of the easiest jurisdictions in the world to steal cars. And our residents are here. And I'm sure everyone here, every councillor would have been inundated with residents frustrated. And they're not sure who to be frustrated at. I was at a town hall meeting with Councillor Pleshy and Councillor Brar recently, and the turnout was phenomenal. There wasn't room left in the community center, and it was all about auto thefts. And they just wanted answers. And, you know, we're doing our advocacy. We're not going to stop our advocacy in terms of the national changes that are needed. But I've identified a best practice that is going to be a temporary solution where we can radically decrease auto thefts. A $6 item can prevent a $60,000 car being stolen in 60 seconds. So criminal organizations are using this relay attack where they can replicate your key from outside your house. They can take your car in 60 seconds. 3 members of council have had their cars stolen recently. Just on the weekend, Councillor Keenan, my condolences, his car was stolen. So the status quo and waiting for national change isn't good enough. Here's an example of a Faraday bag, $6. You put your key in it, just like that, and you can't do the relay attack. They can't steal your car. So I've met with Peel Crime Stoppers, our friend Imran Hassan there. I've spoken to the police about it. You know, I noticed that there were some police stations in the country that were handing these bags out for residents that were frustrated about car thefts. You could walk in and get it. I wanted to do something much broader. And I have a motion to that effect. You can put the motion on the screen. I want us to identify the 5 worst areas in the city where we've had the highest prevalence of auto thefts. And maybe it's convenience to a fast transit route that makes it more vulnerable. I want us to pick the 5 worst areas in the city, and we distribute this Faraday bag to that neighborhood. And if it works, and we see a drastic decline in auto thefts, like we hear, you know, law enforcement will tell you they can't steal your car if you use this. We do this pilot project in 5 areas, 1 in each ward pairing in the city. And if we see a drastic decline, we could spread it out even farther until we get the changes to CBSA and other national changes that are required. But we have to do something. Our residents are frustrated beyond belief. And so this is an inexpensive project that could make a big difference in our community. And so I start with the pilot project, and we roll this out farther. We have the motion on the floor, and we can work with our community safety office, PRP, and the city to identify what those areas are. I don't know what the worst area in each, because frankly, every neighborhood says that they've got, they may be the worst area in the city. We'll get the stats from the police. They know where every car has been stolen that's been reported, and then we can, in those areas, do this distribution. And as we distribute the bag, it's simple like this. You mail the bag out. So I propose a neighborhood, say of, you identify a neighborhood of 1,000 homes. You mail this bag out, and also with a letter about why it's important to use it, and to allow us to test out this technology. And I close with this. Gangs are the ones stealing the cars. It's a revenue tool for gangs. Every day that goes by, gangs are getting more resources in our country. They're becoming stronger. Before you'd see, jewelry or weapons or drugs as a revenue tool for organized crime. It's become cars now. Cars is a massive revenue tool for organized crimes. They're becoming stronger in our country because government has been lazy to respond to auto thefts. And I don't want us to be lazy. I don't want us to wait in the city of Brampton. We have to do something. So this pilot project, frankly, could be very instructive. 3-month period, we'll be able to tell very, very quickly what the decline in auto thefts was. So I've got the motion on the floor and would appreciate council's support of this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I do have a speakers list, Councillor Keenan and Councillor Singh. Councillor Keenan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as Mayor Brown said, I was probably the most recent victim from this table. which is a horrible feeling to go out and feel that. And I know so many people in our community are going through that. So I thank the mayor for bringing this motion. I know it doesn't need a seconder, but I would love to be it. And I can attest to the fact that it's multiple items like the mayor is presenting here today that would stop it. You know, thanks to the great work of the Peel Regional Police, hats off to them, I was able to get my car recovered and the person, but it was through technology that allowed us to get the vehicle back. And it was also cooperation from the community. So everything together, I think, is going to start to bring these car thefts down, and I think this is a fantastic motion. And I'm happy about it. I think it's a great idea. I do see one amendment that I would make, if that's okay, and it's just to include in part one where it says the partnership with Peel Crime Stoppers, and I believe our Office of Community Safety should be involved as well, if the mayor will be okay with me adding that. But I really appreciate this motion for sure, and I'm very happy to support it.
Thank you very much.
Just to say briefly, that's obviously a friendly amendment.
Thank you. And during last election, when I ran, the pressing issues were, you know, LRT, university, property tax. And this time, it's always good to get a good pulse check when you door knock. And this time, it was clear. It was auto theft. It was just such a pressing issue in wards 9 and 10. Every other door, not even crime, just auto theft, not property tax, auto theft, auto theft, auto theft. And, you know, we're not experts in crime, we're not experts in auto theft, but I made a commitment that I will try whatever I can in my power to help alleviate some of those pressures, because the community is feeling it. I know you're part of many WhatsApp groups, we're part of the same WhatsApp groups. Every day there's videos in there showing people's cars getting stolen. And it's just painful to watch, and you feel so helpless. So I'm more than happy to support this initiative. I will support any initiative to address auto theft. You know, we hear the numbers, we look at the statistics, but as politicians and counselors, we know the families. And when somebody goes through an experience like that, it is very traumatic for them. And so sometimes you don't capture that in the statistics, but you know, it's a traumatic experience for the community, it's a traumatic experience for the family members, and it's a traumatic experience for the victims. So it's important that we try to help address this issue. So I'm more than happy to support this initiative and any other initiative around auto theft, because it's just out of control, and we have to try to stop it. So more than happy to support this. Thank you, Mayor Brown, for bringing this forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Next, Councillor Santos.
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. Also happy to, can you hear? Yeah, also happy to support this pilot project. I do have a friendly amendment to the motion. So I know that the Faraday pouch bag, and the suggestion is to mail it out with a letter, communications with a letter, but over the past year and a half, 2 years now, talking to residents about this issue, Peel Regional Police actually have more tips and different guidelines on how to keep your car safe and preventing theft. So simple things like lock your door or park your car in the garage, like things like that. So if we're going to communicate something, I think it should be more than just the instructions on the bag. It should also include tips. So instructions on how to use Faraday pouch bag and Peel Regional Police tips on how to prevent auto theft on your property, just as a friendly amendment. And then the other thing I'll add is that all of these measures are still very reactive for the most part and very temporary. So it's great that we're dealing with it now, but organized crime is a long-term game, and they'll just keep on going. And so we have last week or the week before, I can't remember, asked staff to also help us with better advocacy to the auto manufacturers industry to implement better technology to make their cars theft proof, similar to the Tesla technology as well. So I think some advocacy needs to happen also. And then my final piece is just a question on timing and purchasing and how this might roll out timing-wise. Mr. Mayor, did you have any thoughts on how long or how soon?
So the goal would be to roll this out as quickly as possible. So I would leave that to, once we pass this motion, I assume that the whoever the CEO deems it would fall under, that they would roll it out as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no further questions. That amendment's fine, and I know, just for clarification to staff, we did provide direction about advocacy to auto manufacturers, et cetera, and the industry regarding the manufacturing of their products. I'm assuming that's still in the roster, so we don't have to deal with that now. I just want to point that out. We still have to do that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you through you, Chair. Thank you, Mayor Brown. Having just finished serving on the Police Services Board, I was happy to work with Chair Chada when he moved his motion regarding a summit for auto theft. What I find genius about what you're doing, Mayor Brown, if you permit me by saying, is a simple sort of, we're looking at a product, and I learned the hard way when I got my car stolen, and they suggested I get the box, and I bought it off of Amazon and stuff. But with the simple practicality of this, I think it sends a large message, and your message, we're to governments, we're to, we are trying to do something. So I think there's an education piece to residents, because when they receive it, I'm sure a lot of residents are not going to know, why am I receiving this, and start looking it through, and certainly that sends a sign, I think, and a signal to that City of Brampton is stepping up, and we want to sort of, we're tired of the same old, and truly, not only me experiencing it, but speaking to residents, and they're tired of listening to us talk. So this really shows some action, and it's quite genius on a small product. I think it's just the symbolism around it is just huge. So thank you, Mayor Brown.
Thank you. Councillor Pleshy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for bringing this forward. I think, there could be other opportunities here as well with, the funding. You could go out to the insurance industry to say, this is a huge possibility of lowering insurance rates in Brampton if this is, potentially spread out throughout the city. We've been told that Brampton has the highest insurance rates, and this is a great example of government stepping up to and with the community try and tackle that, but also sponsorship opportunities as well. All the big players, the Ford, the Chryslers, the list goes on and on and on. I'm not going to name them all, but they're not changing the way they make vehicles. They're making it a lot easier for people to go out and steal cars with the way that they're actually doing nothing to prevent the theft of vehicles. The way they're stealing vehicles nowadays, the alarms are disabled as fast as they're getting into your car and driving away. So, here's another opportunity. Hopefully, maybe we go to some local dealerships and to see if they'll help. And I can tell you, if they don't help, then their mind is on the sale of the vehicle that was just that the person just had it stolen from. That's what their mind is on. Their mind is on selling that car because that vehicle is stolen and sent to the east. So, and I'm happy to go to every dealership and tell them how greedy that I think that they are, and that I'm happy to even put a motion forward to raise business rates for car dealers in the city of Brampton if they don't want to participate in supporting Brampton's community. Happy to do that. Happy to be that guy on council. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pleshy. And next I have Councillor Power.
Thank you, through the chair. This initiative is an amazing initiative, and I applaud you for bringing it forward. Might I suggest with the letter, make it multilingual? Because in some of the communities that we represent, language would be a challenge, right? And if you got this in the mail, you might not know what to do with it, right?
I think that's a welcome suggestion, a friendly amendment. I look to our communications director, I'm sure we can put something together that would fit in an envelope this small, that we could have with police safety tips and instruction why we're doing this and what the city's doing on advocacy.
Community Safety Office.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I see no further speakers, so I'll just add just a quick comment that thank you, Mayor, and thank you, members of council, for having thought about this for quite some time. I've always stated that, you know, when you purchase a vehicle, you spend $70,000, $80,000 or whatever the price of the vehicle is, and it can be stolen so quickly. It's the same as leaving a bag of cash on your driveway. And if residents can take a simple measure that will stymie that effort and will prevent a vehicle theft from happening, I know the residents will be very appreciative of this council for taking those steps. So members of council, we have a motion as read on the screen with amendments. All in favor, or is anyone opposed? I see none, that carries. Next, members of council, we have one more item to deal with, also a discussion brought at request of Mayor Brown on tourism. And the report accompanying it, thank you.
I'll just speak to this initial. We've got the legacy, is that the right word? Legacy contributions? Marquee.
Marquee.
The marquee contributions. And there's some events that I just love. You know, I look at the Ribbon Roll or Fold or the Jazz Festival where you're packed. They're packed. We have some functions, some groups that we support, well, frankly, it doesn't get the same participation. You know, I wonder between now and next week when we look at this, if you could gather for us the participation numbers, in the sense that by adding more to the grant program, we're reducing the legacy ones. So the last few years, some of these functions will be going down from 65, I guess, to 46. And so my concern is, I don't want to damage the viability of some of these events. I met with the folks at Ribbon Roll, and they said their costs haven't changed, the city costs have changed. And so their goal is to raise money for the hospital. Just give you one example. They want to raise money for the hospital. I love that they're raising money for the hospital, but what it costs to rent a stage now is dramatically more expensive. So, and maybe there's two sides to this. Maybe there's a side that they're telling us that's different than the staff interpretation, but I'm hearing that their cost to put on a city event at Gage Park has gone up like this, but now the grant's going to go down to the point they have some members saying, does it still make sense to do this? I look at the Jazz Festival, who reached out too. I was blown away by some of the features they added this year. What I loved about the Jazz Festival this year is not only did it have, you know, all the adults that love jazz, but I also saw a ton of kids there, because there was this, you know, there was Lego sections and jazz for kids sections. It just became a fun family day. And, you know, how much do I love going into our downtown and seeing a sea of people? I love that. Fold, you know, gets national attention. I know Councillor Santos, big supporter of Fold. You know, these are some great events. I don't want to put any of them in jeopardy, and I don't want to diminish the support we offer them. So I'd like to see an amendment or a solution to this. I know it's difficult to do on the spot. I know Councillor Keenan and I were speaking about the Jazz Festival in particular, and Councillor Pelleshi, but maybe this is something we could wordsmith over the next week once we get the participation numbers, because I realize you can't pick and choose. It's difficult to say these marquee events are great and these ones, you know, aren't, but if there was a barometer of participation numbers, we could say maybe the ones that hit the participation targets, you know, we can keep it that higher number. That wasn't really a question, but Councillor, Jason?
Thanks, through the chair. I think it's just worth mentioning, just based on the question. So with respect to the marquee events, we don't really have a way. They don't measure, and we don't measure attendance per se. It's not, the city provides grant funding to support them. It's not, we don't manage the event, so we don't measure the attendance. They give us estimates, and we base things on those estimates. a few other things I could just share on the event and just some history for some of the newer councillors. So 3 years ago, we approved, council approved the use of a new economic calculator for the events. So that really assesses kind of economic return on the events that the program hosts. The other thing was that council approved moving the marquee, those 6, I think some of the ones that Mayor Brown's referencing, in under the grant umbrella. So those are 2 past decisions. We can always take new council direction, but the events are part of it. And then just mention with respect to last year, the $60,000 that you'll see in the charts in the appendices of the report, that was, so council directed to use the calculator. Then last year, because of COVID, council, those were the comments, the council made a decision to not use the calculator last year. The numbers we've provided in the recommendations this year are the same as last year. If we use the calculator, I can give an example of the delegation this morning. They would probably get 50% less than what staff's recommending if we use the calculator. So just putting that out there, if we go back to what council's previously approved on using that economic return, these organizations, Rotary, I think it was Rotary, they would get about 36,000 instead of the 60 being recommended. So this year's recommendations are the same as last year's. The larger events will all be getting the 60 grand. So just put that context out there, and we can, I don't think we can come back with attendance numbers, though.
Okay, well, the one the best information possible, and maybe we've got, maybe I'm not a fan of the calculator we're using. We could find a better way to analyze these events, and we all go to them. I see the city staff at the events. I go to them. We all know which ones were empty and which ones were packed. And so we can have those conversations. And also what I like to be included, I got to understand how our costs have gone up so much. We had the issue just recently with Regeneration, coldest night of the year, and they told me that, that the cost of the stage skyrocketed. When I hear the Rotary say the same thing and Jazz say the same thing, you get one person say it, you sort of, you don't take it as seriously, but you get multiple groups saying that it costs so much more now to use the city mandated staging and sound. Can we get that information, and maybe on that basis of the increased cost? And I get it, it's inflationary. Everything is costing more. I just don't want to inhibit the ability to put on these iconic Brampton events. And just between now and next week, if we could get that information to council, then maybe we can make a decision on how best to do that. And we can, and I know we don't have official numbers, but if you hear their numbers, and then you get the numbers that staff saw and council will say they saw at the event, you'll get a good barometer of what was there.
Sure, through the chair, we can bring back some more information. I think to your comment on the inflationary piece, some of the staging and some of those elements that the city would use, for instance, in Garden Square, I think some of those are third parties. So bringing in a third party to kind of set up their stage, the city's cost remains the same. And we could adjust numbers accordingly if that's council's will, and we'll bring back more information.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Councillor Keenan.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. I do have a couple of questions. Some of them have been answered based on what I've heard already. Is it fair to say that we have a criteria to be a marquee festival, that there is a criteria that they have to follow in order to get some funding?
Through the chair, that's absolutely correct. So right now, we have a sponsorship program that requires that events are held in the city of Brampton by organizations that are based in Brampton. As part of the tourism strategy that was passed about 3 years ago, we are moving in a direction with sponsorship where we would like to, once the municipal accommodation tax has been implemented in the city, to be able to attract marquee tourism activations from outside of the city that will bring economic growth and more people into the city. But presently, there is criteria specifically based on residency or based on being in Brampton and happening in Brampton.
Is there any criteria around the success and the size of the event and what it will bring to the city and what the economical impact will be for the surrounding businesses and all that? When I'm asking that, I'm looking at it and there's some events here that I've never heard of receiving the same funding as something that I've been to many times and has been totally packed. And I'm thinking I haven't heard about it because maybe it wasn't as big or maybe it wasn't marketed as well. But I look at it and I'm thinking some of these, should there be a secondary category for events that we know are successful and then the newcomers have to prove themselves to make it into that funding level? I'm just spitballing. Is that a criteria now?
Through the
currently?
chair, it is. And so when we do all of those pieces and include using Destinations International's economic impact calculator for events, which is recognized, as I say, globally, what we're seeing is that some of the legacy events that have been in the city for years and years and years are actually scoring much lower than some of the newer ones. And so based on COVID, based on recession, last year there was a motion from council to keep everything uniform across the board, except for the new events, which I believe Mayor Brown, you suggested were $5,000 less. So what we're again recommending this year, even though some of the events are doing much better in terms of attracting people from beyond 40 kilometers, which is considered a tourist or a visitor to the city, those scores are still on the low side. And so we don't want to impact those organizers in a negative way whatsoever.
Okay.
And so again, recommending more of that equity across the board.
And understanding that some of these festivals receive funding from other levels of government as well. And in order to do so, they must maintain the municipal portion of that funding. As we decrease, they decrease, or they might cancel if ours isn't enough. And based on what I'm hearing, we're reviewing these year in and year out, even for festivals that have been here for many, many years and will continue to do so. And I'm also wondering if there's a way that we can just preset that for a few years so that once we say this is going to be the funding for these key 6, not saying we can't take in any new ones each year, but based on the process that they go through, should we be looking at, pre-doing that category that they're going to get that funding the following year, given the fact that they're going to be coming back, which we can see the big 6 do, to help them with their planning, their process. I would really like to look at that so that they know kind of what to gauge and they're not just coming in hearing, hey, it's $20,000 less from the city this year, then they got so much work to do, and we have the potential of losing out on some really great festivals, or we lose out on the fact to really have these festivals be the impact that they are. Like, I was at 2 of them this past year, and to Mayor Brown's comment, my kids enjoyed the jazz festival, I think, more than we did because of the elements that were put there. And those elements are there because of the funding, because of the hard work of the people that are organizing these festivals. And they're all not for profit, right? They're doing it for the community engagement. And it does so well for our downtown when we see these things come in. So I'm the opposite of decreasing. I like to see an increase to some of these things because they're so impactful in our community. But I really think we should take that away to see if we can accomplish some of those. I know it's a short time because I know they're waiting to find out about their funding, I could assume. And just to understand this one step further, are we, as council, choosing option 1 or option 2 in this report for funding?
Through the chair, that's what we are hoping for, yes. And to your previous query, we have looked at multiple years of funding for these groups, but because we rely on budget on an annual basis, we haven't been able to do that yet. And again, I will be back to you later this quarter with a recommendation for implementing the municipal accommodation tax, which will bring in revenues at 4% for hotel, Vrbo, B&B stays in the city that we can funnel towards amping up our sponsorship program. And in that case, I think that we have a better ability, and Nash isn't here. Nash will, let us know for sure. But we are aiming so that, we can give out 2-year grants potentially. Because when you are planning big events, you really need to start planning as soon as your event ends. And, you know, for example, for Jazz Festival, their event is in September, they won't know probably until March if they have funding for this year. But if they can start right off the block in September when their event is finished, planning for the coming year, that means a lot for event organizers. So we know that, and we're working toward that.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate it. And I think, I'm not sure what the mayor's direction was going to be with this, but I'm sure it's going to be referred back to staff to try to implement some of the comments heard here today. Would that be correct, Mr. Chair?
That is correct, Council. Any further questions?
None for me. Thank you so much.
Very good. So we have a motion as moved that this be referred back to staff for further review and report to the February 8th meeting of council. All in favor, any opposed? Oh, there are two more members. My apologies. They just popped on. Councillor Santos. No? Councillor Santos.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, and just for the benefit of the newly elected councillors in this term, for many of these events and the marquee events that end up getting funding from the city, does the city get acknowledgement at these events for their sponsorship?
Through the chair, they absolutely, we do, the city does, yes. And in addition to the economic impact calculation, there is a portion that we look at in terms of how much recognition is a group willing to give us. And so there are 4 points allotted to you're checking all the boxes off, or you're checking 1 or 2 boxes off. Great. To give you a score.
So then I will just then publicly share that at but an event in particular that I have been at, because I've attended the majority of these events, it was the reverse treatment in terms of specifically the mayor, and a lack of acknowledgement of the mayor, etc., in terms of the support for the event itself. And I think that perhaps, I don't know if there's a contract that needs to be signed by these organizations to ensure that the city is acknowledged and council and the mayor are acknowledged accordingly within the program. I think that I was very disappointed with one of the festivals in the way that a particular organizer was treating members of council as well as the mayor in particular.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perhaps through the chair, you could whisper that in my ear at some point, just so we can make sure that we've got everybody at the same level.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Pallesi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking over at Councillor Medeiros, is this 9 years we've been doing this? It's the exact same thing every single time. I don't know if there's any other municipality that beats up on a process as much as this process here. Every year, council comes in and says, no, I want to change it. Staff bring us the best foot forward, and yet we continue to say, no, tweak this, change that. And I think we're reverting back to 3-4 years ago, basically, is what it's kind of looking like now. I don't know. It's astonishing. It's unfortunate. I think, if anything, the process that needs to change is, and it falls on council, if you have comments on a report, reach out to staff and have those discussions with staff prior to it coming to council and then referring to committee and then having to go to council. Because you've mentioned it, that there's festivals here that are dying to know where they stand. There are festivals here that need to know the city's supporting them to obtain funding somewhere else, obtain a grant somewhere else, and they have timelines. And so I think in future, I think we need to, if we're going to start this a little bit sooner, then you have to be able to get together with staff to ask your questions and to provide your comments if you're planning on changing anything, because it's typical government. It's so unfortunate because we're dragging our feet, not making a decision. But I guess it is what it is. The only thing that I'll comment on is, and I think it's Caribram. Caribram is probably the longest festival in the city of Brampton to date. Well before Mississauga had Mississauga Bram, or whatever they call their fake festival down there. That was one thing that Hazel McCallion certainly looked at Brampton and said, we need that. And I don't find that, you know, Cara Bram's a lot different than what it was when I was a kid. You know, the amount of people that used to go in and out of our rec centers compared to probably the last 3-4 years is a little bit different. But you used to be able to catch a bus and the bus would be free and it would take you to each pavilion, and I'm not even sure that's even possible anymore. But I think Cara Bram is, for me, close to my heart. I can remember seeing those signs come up and loving every minute of, you know, the signs scattered throughout the city and all the rec centers that were a part of it, and all the pavilions, and so certainly something that I remember, and you know, an event like that, you know, if we're not able to help kind of turn that around and make it like the way it was, is that one of the events that, you know, that dies? I would never want to see that. I certainly want Cara Bram to be successful, and you know, what else can we do? And I don't know if money is that, or maybe it's time that Cara Bram needs to come under the Brampton umbrella.
And
You know, we've talked about that before too.
And through the chair, I have had and am having conversations with Angela about what Cara Bram looks like in the future. One of the things that the tourism strategy tasks us with is a large food festival. And so is there an opportunity to combine a large food festival with Cara Bram? The city of Surrey has a fusion festival, which I think is a model for us to look at. It's quite fabulous based on what I can see. We're also going to be coming back to you, you're going to see lots of me this year, with regard to some space in the northeast quadrant of the city in terms of some dedicated event space, which I think will also help in being able to do things in one location that's a little bit larger.
And then what was that's fantastic. Look forward to seeing you more often. There was a lacrosse one that used to be, is the Minto or something that used to be on here every year as well. And that was, I don't know which one was older, probably the lacrosse one, but the Minto?
So through the chair, the tourism sponsorship program includes the marquee festivals as well as the sport tourism events.
Okay. I hadn't seen.
So that's part of the whole ask.
The Macaulay. I think that's the one that was it. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pleshy. So we have the referral back to staff. All in favor, any opposed? Is there,
Now that the,
Go ahead,
sorry,
Jason.
through the chair, now that the mayor is back, I was just wondering if we could, so that the information coming back, we could look at the multi-year budgeting, potentially with finance. We can look at the background on kind of council's process with the 6 marquee, where the approvals happen, and then some details on the calculator and potential other options. Is there anything else specifically?
Just to add what Councilor Pleshy said about Cara Bram. Like what we can do to help there, because I went into some empty halls that we didn't market it. I thought the relationship with the city was very poor. What can we do to help resuscitate that to be what it can be?
Great.
And through the chair, we'll also add the historical funding and in-kind that has been provided to those groups as well, so you can see over a number of years how the city has supported.
Very good. Thank you very much. So members of the committee, we have a motion to refer this back to staff. All in favor, any opposed? That carries. So with that, we have now dealt with the items that we had put off, and we are now finishing our Public Works and Engineering. Do members of the committee have any questions with regards to this section? Seeing none. Mr. Clerk, do we have any questions from members of the public with regards to the Public Works and Engineering section?
Through you, Chair Vicente, we do not, and I do not see any members of the public in attendance to ask questions.
Very good. So now we'll move on to Community Services to be chaired by Councillor Santos. Councillor. Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Clerk, if it's okay, I'll just chair from here to save time. The only item I believe is a new item that was added by Councillor Vicente, who I'm realizing perhaps could have just talked about it in the previous section. Item 12.3.1, Lusofonia Festival. Councillor Vicente, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So, with regards to the Lusofonia Festival, I'm believing that we have done this. We did this last year, and we're doing it. We're asking for this to come forward again this year. So we had a very brief conversation with the organizers and myself, Councillor Medeiros, and Mayor Brown. And of course, speaking about the festival as it took place last year, it was absolutely incredible. 3-day festival, well attended during every day of the festival, lineups for food, for vendors, etc. And so some of the discussion that we had, and perhaps Councillor Medeiros can expand, just looking for ways for the city to do more to help that festival and to see how we can leverage Brampton-based vendors, Brampton-based food vendors, so that their participation is reflected in that festival as well. And we're asking staff to report back to us on what costs we may incur as part of our support for that festival, and to see that come before council as soon as staff can provide that information to us after you've had the opportunity to speak with the organizers there.
Through the chair, I did speak very briefly with the organizer yesterday, so we have connected, but just perhaps what we can also do with the information that we bring back to you is we can provide you with the list of things that we do to support these marquee festivals in the city, so that, again, we try to be fair with all of them and provide the same level of support. So we will make sure that's part of the report back to you next week.
Okay, thank you. Let's have speakers. Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you for you, Chair. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I apologize, Councillor Medeiros.
Oh.
Back to you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Councillor.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
My apologies.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councillor Vicente, for bringing this forward. And certainly, the one comment I heard consistently were local vendors didn't have the opportunity to participate. So I would hope that the organizer understands, as part of our sort of support, that there would be a first right of refusal to local. And the one aspect we talked about yesterday, they necessarily don't have to be Portuguese businesses. There's other local vendors who would love to be there. And I'll tell you what I heard from a lot of folks out who were at the event, you know, to go grab a hot dog or grab a burger or something. So, you know, just open it up to local vendors and they have the opportunity. Thank you.
And through the chair, that is something that we do talk to all of our funding recipients about, that there are food vendors in the city, whether it's film, whether it's events, whether it's, you know, marquee or sporting, to please, and we provide that information to them if they don't have it.
Thank you, Councillor Medeiros and Councillor Vicente. So there's a motion moved by Councillor Vicente. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That carries. Next item on community services is councillor's question period. Do any members of council have any questions? I see none. Mr. Clerk, do we have any public questions online or here in the gallery?
Chair Santos, we do not.
Thank you. And referred matters list, which is published quarterly on a meeting agenda. And do any members have any questions or comments regarding the referred matters list? I see none. Public question period, Mr. Clerk, do we have any questions regarding any section on the committee agenda today?
There are none.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Then our next item is closed session. I have a motion moved by Councillor Brar to move into closed session to deal with item 15.2 and an added item by the mayor, 15.3. 15.2, I believe, Mr. Clerk, was held. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
A position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. A governance matter, and then the items that Mayor Brown, which I do not recall off the top of my head.
Through you, Chair Santos, it is on the screen. It's litigation or potential litigation and personnel matters affecting identifiable individuals, a discussion regarding bylaw enforcement.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Mr. Clerk, how much time would you possibly need?
10 minutes would be appreciated, please.
Okay, so 10 minutes at 2:03, we will move into closed session. I have a motion, again, moved by Councillor Barr. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you, that carries. We'll see you in closed at 2:03.
Oh, I'll give it to you. Sorry.
Hi, Mr. Clerk. It's Councillor Santos checking in.
Hi, Councillor Santos. You're coming through loud and clear. We're just going to get underway in a moment. You should have it now. Can you just touch your touch screen just so it comes up? Okay. So members of committee, just before we get underway, I see Councillor online is Councillor Santos, Councillor Vasante, Councillor Fortini, and we have 5 members in chambers, so we do have quorum. You can proceed.
Welcome back. In continuing interest of transparency and open government, I will report in public session any outcomes from today's closed session business. As a result of our closed session today, can we get the clerk to report the following?
Through you, Chair Brar, the following items were considered in closed session. 15.2, which was, an open meeting exception under 239(2)K, the Municipal Act, a plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. It was a governance matter. This item was considered in closed session and direction was given to staff. Added item 15.3, which is an item in regards to an open meeting exception under the
litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, and personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, a discussion about bylaw enforcement. That item was considered enclosed and no direction was given. And finally, Chair Berard, just to advise committee that item 15.1 was approved as part of the consent motion, but as part of that direction that was deemed given with inclusion on consent, there is a public motion, and the public motion is on the screen in regards to a property acquisition matter, and we will require just a mover of that item.
Happy to move, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair.
Moved by Councillor Vicente. All in favor? All opposed? None? Seeing none? We'll go on to the next item. Our last item of business is item 16, adjournment. A committee is next scheduled to meet Wednesday, February 22nd, 2023 at 9:30 a.m. I have a motion moved by Councillor Palashi to adjourn today's meeting. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chair Berard.